Welcome back to the Wicked Psychology live stream. This week we are going to do Jessy Kurczewski, and the overarching story for this is that it's in Wisconsin. She's a 39-year-old, and she stands accused of murdering her friend Lynn back in 2018. She allegedly defrauded nearly $300,000 from her friend before killing her, and the method of killing her is through eye drops, which definitely caught my attention as a way I've never heard before. So I'm definitely interested to see how that plays out, and also how she defrauded her friend.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the state, I'm going to take this opportunity. It's really our first and only opportunity to thank you all for your attention going forward. We talked a lot yesterday about how long this trial is going to go. That's certainly not lost on us, what we're taking you all away from, and we appreciate it. I want you to know we've all worked hard to organize ourselves and make sure we can go through this as quickly and efficiently as possible over these next few weeks. That being said, there is a lot to unpack in a case like this. While I go through my opening, you're going to see almost two timelines. As I prepared for this, I kept seeing almost two timelines emerging. There's certainly a factual, bare bones timeline of theft, murder, and more theft. But there's this almost overlaid timeline of all of the defendant's lies and deceit on top of that bare bones timeline. That's a little bit tricky to go through and process, but let's start it. So this is Wisconsin versus Jessy Kurczewski. Said otherwise, this is a case of murder, greed, and lies. The judge just read you the three counts. Of course, in the law, we call murder intentional homicide, and that's count one. And it's a homicide or murder of Lynn Hernan. Count two is a theft of over $100,000 of Lynn Hernan. And those date ranges, January 1st of 2016 until October 3rd of 2018, really represent the theft while Lynn Hernan was still alive. And then count three is yet more theft, more greed, of theft of almost $87,000 from Lynn Hernan's estate from October 4th until July 9th of 2019, after her murder. We all come into court with ideas of what homicide or murder are and what a theft is, and certainly there's legal elements that have to be proved that the judge read to you, and we'll go through a bit more because as the party that has to prove each of those elements to you, I want to make sure you have a good understanding of what intentional homicide is, not just sort of the classic example of somebody shooting another individual in the head and killing them. It can be many things. In this case, a poisoning. But first, though I said this is a case against Jessy Kurczewski, murder, greed, and lies, at the heart of this case, what I don't want to be lost on you is this is a case about Lynn Hernan, the victim. So let's see who Lynn Hernan was. Lynn Hernan was an individual with a small but close group of friends. I think you're going to see as the evidence comes in that it was really two distinct groups of friends. On the one side was Miss Kurczewski and her mother, Jennifer Flower. On the other side was these individuals, Keith Lang, Corrine Posa, Jim Kelleher, and Anthony Posa. And you'll hear from many of them. Now, interestingly, Lynn Hernan was also an individual with no children of her own. So she sort of pseudo-adopted her friend, Jennifer Flower's daughter, Jessy Kurczewski, and did the same thing with Corrine Posa's son, Anthony. And you're going to hear that they were named the two beneficiaries of Lynn Hernan's will, or her estate, and we'll get into that a lot as well. Lynn was also a cat lover. That seems like a flippant thing I put on there, but it's actually very important because, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but at the very day of October 3rd, when police come and talk to Jessy Kurczewski, they ask her point blank, do you think this could be a suicide? And her answer was, well, yes or no, I don't really know. I don't think Lynn would have left her cats. And that's what Anthony, Jim, and Corrine will also tell you. That Lynn was a person who didn't just love her cats like many people. She loved her cats. She was not going to leave her cats alone to fend for themselves or let somebody else come in and take care of these cats. The cat lover part is actually a very important part to all of this. While she loved cats, hated technology. Didn't own a computer, didn't own a smartphone, used a flip phone sort of when she had to. didn't use email, had no email address of her own, had no way of checking it, didn't know how to check it. When she paid bills, it was with cash or over the phone, making transfers through the bank over the phone, or going in person to a branch and making a payment on a credit card or utility bill or something like that. You're going to see, and we'll get into pattern of life and what that is and what that means. But Lynn was not a person to go online and pay a bill. She was not checking her credit card statements online. She was not checking email. She was doing nothing. Had no computer or any device to access the internet. And frankly, dead at only 62 years old from a tetrahydrozoline poisoning after the defendant gave her a bottle laced with Visine eye drops to drink. So I told you we'd get into the legalities of what is intentional homicide. Right? The judge just read these. I'm not going to go through each part the judge just read you, but I am going to highlight that we have to prove to you that Ms. Kurczewski caused the death of Lynn Hernan. I want to highlight that her act has to be a substantial factor. And certainly here you're going to hear, really in the defendant's own words, that she gave Ms. Hernan a bottle of water that she knew to be filled with Visine eye drops. Second element, that Ms. Kurczewski was aware or intended to kill Lynn Hernan. And that can mean that she was aware or practically certain that her act was going to kill Lynn Hernan. We're going to show you that, again, with the defendant's own statement. And when she's talking to detectives after she's told, because there's many versions of the defendant's statement, and they constantly change as she gathers more information through law enforcement. But ultimately, she admits to giving that bottle with Visine in it for Lynn Hernan to drink. And when the detectives ask her, well, did you know that was going to kill her? She says, I was sick because I knew it could kill her. And you're going to hear that knowing that, Ms. Kurczewski still left Lynn Hernan alone, left her house. In fact, you're going to hear that she didn't spend the day worried about Lynn. She was opening a JCPenney account in Lynn's name that same morning. And she was using other accounts of Lynn to go shopping, do some online shopping, while she knew she had just given Lynn poison. Let's talk about intent. Lynn Hernan's not here to tell you what went on October 3rd, 2018. So you have to look at all of the defendant's acts, words, and statements. That's sort of subcategory 1. And then over here, you have to look at all the facts and circumstances that were going on around October 3rd, 2018 for us to show you that Jessy Kurczewski did intend to kill Lynn Hernan. Again, the judge just read this to you, but it's important. We often hear motive in TV shows and movies. The state always talks about, what was the motive? Here's her motive. We don't have to prove motive to you. That's not something in those two elements. We do have to show intent. We don't have to show motive. As this instruction said, motive is often helpful. And here it's pretty simple. As we go through the financials fairly painstakingly, you're going to see that the access Ms. Kurczewski had to Lynn Hernan allowed her to steal every dollar almost that Lynn Hernan was worth in life. And knowing that she was going to be the personal representative of Lynn Hernan's estate, you're going to see that in or about October 3rd, 2018, Lynn Hernan became worth more dead than alive to Jessy Kurczewski. But it's important to note, intent is not the same as motive. The theft counts really go to that motive, but they're separate crimes. Again, here are the elements, verbatim from what the judge just read to you. I try as best I can in openings to let the jury know what I think your job is really going to boil down to. And so with element 1, that's going to be pretty simple for you. That Jessy Kurczewski intentionally transferred property of Lynn Hernan between January of 2016 and October of 2018. You're going to see, and we're going to focus on 28 checks that were all written off Lynn Hernan's account to Jessy Kurczewski. By her cashing those, that's transferring property. That's just element 1 right there. This wasn't a bank error. This wasn't an, oh my gosh, it went into my account and I don't know who deposited this. This is just transferring property. That's element 1, period. What becomes an issue is elements 2 and 3. Again, did Lynn Hernan consent to those money transfers into the defendant's accounts? So that's kind of 2 and 3 rolled in together. And we'll talk about that going forward. Again, number 4 is going to be easy. I don't think you're going to have to spend much time worried about element 4 because it's going to be clear that the defendant never paid back any dollar amount to Lynn either while she was living, and even though she had access to the estate account as personal representative, she didn't put any money back into the estate. That she said, oh, you know, when she died, I owed Lynn $144,000, so let me put that back in the estate. Not a single dollar went back to Lynn Hernan, either alive or dead. So number 4, absolutely, the defendant intended to permanently deprive Lynn Hernan of these monies. So let's talk about that consent. It's the same in count 3, rather quickly, the estate. And this, as Ms. Kurczewski and Anthony Poza were the only 2 beneficiaries of Lynn Hernan's property at that point, really this becomes a theft from Anthony Poza. What should have happened was whatever Lynn Hernan's estate was truly worth gets split down the middle, and Jessy Kurczewski should have gotten half, Anthony Poza should have gotten the other half. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Again, consent will be an issue. For count 4, that should be transferred, I apologize about that, but the transfer of property in element 1 and the permanently deprive in element 4 will not be an issue. You're going to see numerous cash withdrawals that Ms. Kurczewski made from Lynn's estate account to herself, where she's just taken out thousands of dollars, roughly $50,000 in cash withdrawals from the estate account. Again, never paid back. We're going to talk about an inheritance loan funding, where essentially Ms. Kurczewski made an agreement with a company that said, I'll put up $10,000 of the inheritance I'm supposed to get if you give me $18,700 right now. And she paid that back, and they refunded some of the money. She should have plugged that refund back into the estate. But the point is, she took all of that money out of the estate. She didn't wait for her inheritance to put that up. She didn't pay back any of the money. So we have roughly $50,000 in cash withdrawals. We have this sort of bogus loan fund that she takes for herself out of the estate, never paying anything back. And we have a number of checks again, written to either the defendant's own credit cards, to her mother's apartment rent, or just to cash for herself, to the tune of almost $87,000 out of the estate. Again, I included this again because for theft, just like for the intentional homicide, again, Lynn's not here to tell you what she consented to because she was murdered on October 3rd, 2018. So you have to, as jurors, look at what the defendant was doing around this time. What are all the facts and circumstances surrounding this time frame now of October 4th to July 9th of 2019? So going back to count 1, I kind of talked about this. But we have this murder element to this case, right? Murder, greed, and lies. The murder part is that our own medical examiner for Waukesha County has been doing this for roughly 35 years. He's going to come in and tell you that as she did her job in this case, she determined the manner of death in this case to be homicide, and that the cause of death was tetrahydrozoline poisoning. Now, she didn't come to that conclusion lightly. She didn't look at one sheet of paper and look at some autopsy photos and look at some scene photos and say, I got it. This case took a lot of time. This took months and months for Dr. Bidzricki to come to her conclusions. She consulted with Dr. Kasinko, who you'll hear from NMS Labs, regarding tetrahydrozoline in general, effects on the body when it's ingested and not just put in the eyes. Dr. B herself ordered several toxicology reports after the original one. She wanted to see more information, as much as she could get. So she was constantly sending lab work out for more toxicology reports. You'll hear she did her own research. She obviously got to see Lynn's body very close in time to October 3rd. And about that, she'll tell you that in her experience over that 35 years, she thought this death scene looked staged. She's been to a number of drug overdose deaths and the scenes, and she'll tell you that this one struck her as being staged. Because she'll tell you that people who legitimately overdose on drugs and end up killing themselves do not have piles of powder sitting on their chest. They don't have powder and pill fragments up in their hair. They don't have pills laying everywhere. They take everything. There's really nothing usually left behind. And so she'll tell you about her observations and why that stuck out to her as something being off about that initial crime scene. She'll obviously tell you about her autopsy and going through that. But by and large, my point is this was not a quick decision she made to say, oh, it's probably a homicide. Let's see how it plays out. This is diligent, thorough work Dr. Bidzricki did to reach her conclusions of homicide and cause of death being tetrahydrozoline poisoning. And she'll tell you there were other drugs or substances in Lynn's system, many pharmaceuticals, but she's still going to tell you that the overall cause of death was that tetrahydrozoline poisoning, eye drops. We know that the defendant, Ms. Kurczewski, killed Lynn Hernan again because eventually, after her story changes a number of times, she admits to detectives that she knowingly gave Lynn Hernan a bottle filled with Visine. And as you can see, Visine has tetrahydrozoline. They're not synonymous, but when we talk about tetrahydrozoline in this case, we're oftentimes talking about Visine. Again, defendant had the intent to kill Lynn Hernan. This is, again, taken directly from the jury instruction as to what intent means. And there it is again. After admitting that she gave this bottle laced with Visine to Lynn Hernan, she told detectives she knew it could very well kill Lynn. She still left, went shopping, opened other credit cards in Lynn's name while Lynn was dying of poisoning. So again, what are all the acts, words, and statements of the defendant? That kind of leads to my greed portion of this whole trial. As to count two, there's the total figure we're going to show to you, and that's for 28 checks from two different bank accounts of Lynn. Over $144,000 taken in about a 2 to 2.5 year span of time. What you'll also see in that time is the defendant was getting paychecks direct deposited into her account. So you'll be able to see exactly what legitimate income she was making from her job when she was unemployed and not making any legitimate income from a job. And over the same span of time, January 1st of 2016 to October 3rd, 2018, her total earnings through jobs at various dental offices was right around $49,000. Now, you're going to see that she absolutely needed to have this $144,000 because when we go through all of Ms. Kurczewski's credit cards, bank statements, spendings, you'll see that in that same time span, 2.5, almost 3 years, her earnings were $49,000, her total expenditures over $500,000. You're also going to see that on these 28 checks. I'm sorry, first of all, this doesn't count. This $144,000 figure does not count all of Lynn's credit cards suddenly being maxed out and over their limit. It doesn't count a $30,000 loan that Ms. Kurczewski took out in Lynn Hernan's name after altering bank documents. We've lost the TV. There we go. Thank you. All right. So, bottom line, by October of 2018, an account of Lynn Hernan's, which from 2014 until spring of 2016 held $250,000. Actually, there was about $500 of interest collected on that in those 2 years. By October of 2018 is down to $87.72. You're going to hear that of that significant chunk gone, Lynn Hernan made two rather large purchases for herself. In 2016, she bought herself a Jeep and paid for that out of this account. And she also bought herself some jewelry. You're going to hear that for much of Lynn Hernan's life, she lived paycheck to paycheck, dollar to dollar, until around 2014 when her mom died and left her $250,000 in inheritance. And so she buys herself a Jeep and she buys herself some jewelry that she ends up paying. She puts on a credit card but pays down off this account with her inheritance in it. Beyond that, $134,000, more than half, is all 20 checks written to Jessy Kurczewski. Of those 20 checks from that account, we'll keep going. Of those 20 checks, 19 of them have a very specific purpose written in the memo. Some say Kohn, K-O-H-N, Law Office. Some say Prosper Funding. Some say America Advance. Some say Citibank. The point is that you'll see the money leave Lynn Hernan's account, go into the defendant's account, and never do any amounts leaving Ms. Kurczewski's account go to those purposes. Deceit and greed. There's another account Ms. Hernan had that's down to $52 by October of 2018. Here we are. But that involves 10 checks written to Ms. Kurczewski for another $10,000. That represents that $144,000 figure. Okay, let's catch up here a little bit. And that's another point. Out of these 20 checks, there's a 21st check out of this account that's written to the Jeep dealership for Lynn's Jeep. Other than those 21 checks, not a single check will you see come out of Lynn Hernan's account to anybody else. This was not an account she was using. But Ms. Kurczewski had access, and Ms. Kurczewski knew that Lynn Hernan didn't have internet to easily check these things. Again, none of these amounts are ever paid back in life or in death to Lynn Hernan. So let's talk about patterns of life. I mentioned that before. Very quickly, as we go through with Detective Plennis, all the financial statements, and there's quite a few of them, and again, we'll try our best to work through them efficiently but thoroughly for you. You're going to see patterns of Lynn Hernan emerge, right? I told you that most of her friends will even tell you, and it's substantiated by her financial statements. She was often a person to use cash. Her credit cards were not used very often. But when they were generally at businesses like Pick and Save in Waukesha, Speedway gas stations in Waukesha, things of that nature. When she used her credit cards, they were paid down very quickly. Her credit score was up in the high 700s to low 800s for much of this time span we'll be talking about, January of 16 to October of 18. No online activity, no IP activity is on her accounts until approximately June of 2018, when Lynn's pattern of almost 2 years at that point that we can see starts to look a lot like Ms. Kurczewski's, where now all of a sudden we're seeing Lynn's credit cards being used a lot, balance is not being paid down, or maybe just the bare minimum so that interest is piling up. We know that Ms. Kurczewski, as I said, she's earning $49,000 of legitimate income in this time, and she's spending well over $500,000. You're going to see that most of those purchases are ATMs, businesses in West Allis, Hales Corners, and Franklin, specific businesses that were talked to about yesterday, Scotty's Pub and Stalis Palace being two of the most prevalent, but also Potawatomi. And you also see that there's frequent online activity. And Detective Plennis will tell you why that's important for law enforcement to recognize that when somebody's pattern of life switches to another person's pattern of life, what does that mean? What does that overlap? What does that change mean? And finally, defendant's acts, words, and statements. And this is to count 3. Taking advantage of her role as the personal representative of Lynn Hernan's estate to steal over $87,000. Again, you're going to see numerous cash withdrawals. You're going to see checks to her own credit cards, checks to cash, and that inheritance loan funding of $18,700. And that brings us to the lies. And this goes on for a number of slides, and I promise you, I pared these down for opening statements. You're going to hear a number of others as this trial goes. But this is kind of that second timeline I'm talking about that goes back now and sort of lays over the bare bones time work. But in March of 2018, Detective Plennis and I are going to show you and talk a lot about clearly altered bank documents where Ms. Kurczewski changed the name of the account holder to Lynn, changed the yearly earnings, changed any reference to spendings at Stalis Palace and Potawatomi, all to get a $30,000 loan in Lynn Hernan's name, but went in to Jessy Kurczewski's account. You're going to see that it went in on March 8th of 2018. That same day, Jessy Kurczewski adds Lynn Hernan to her bank account as a secondary user, obviously so that this loan in Lynn Hernan's name can go into that account. Furthermore, in spring of 2018, and you're going to hear, and Scott Craig is the former boyfriend of Jessy Kurczewski. He was the boyfriend of Ms. Kurczewski until July 9th of 2019, when she was arrested. He'll tell you that he knew of Lynn, knew who Lynn Hernan was. He thought it was a woman that Jessy Kurczewski helped care for, a family friend of Jessy Kurczewski, but he never met her. And in spring of 2018, Ms. Kurczewski tells her boyfriend, who she's living with, who they've been in a relationship for 3 years, she tells him that Lynn is in a coma at Frederick Hospital. That's sometime in spring of 2018, he remembers. Scott Craig will tell you that he believed on October 3rd, 2018, when Ms. Kurczewski tells him over the phone that Lynn has passed away, Scott Craig believed that Jessy Kurczewski was at Frederick Hospital in Lynn's hospital room. He remembers feeling bad, but ultimately not surprised because he thought this woman had been in a coma for 5 months and that it was sort of a natural outcome. Ms. Kurczewski never came clean to Scott Craig. It wasn't until July of 2019 when detectives show up at his door and tell him that Lynn Hernan did not die in Frederick Hospital. She was not in a coma for 5 months. And you'll hear a jail call between Ms. Kurczewski that she makes to her boyfriend a few days after her arrest, Scott Craig, where he's furious that she lied to him about such a huge thing. And you'll hear her try to say, it's only one thing. It's only one thing. What's the big deal? On October 3rd, as we talked about, she's using Lynn Hernan's credit cards, even after giving her this bottle of poison. She's opening up a JCPenney card. She's using that JCPenney card immediately after opening it, about 10:30 in the morning. We move to October 8th of 2018. She goes and picks up Lynn Hernan's jewelry from the medical examiner's office, and within 2 weeks is selling 3 pieces of jewelry to Robert Hack. And what's interesting about this is that Robert Hack makes you declare how long you've owned an item before they're just going to let you sell it, right? They don't want people just taking things that aren't theirs and coming in and selling it and getting the money. Ms. Kurczewski fills out 3 separate forms saying one of these items that she picked up 2 weeks ago, she's owned for 2.5 months. Another one that says she owned it for 3 or 3.5 months. And the third piece she says she has owned for 6 months. Moving to later in October and early November of 2018, you're going to see that there's even more credit card activity for Lynn Hernan's credit cards, weeks after she's dead. In January of 19, here's another big one that involves Scott Craig. He wakes up one day to hear from Ms. Kurczewski, who went out the night before. There's a big text message conversation where she's claiming she feels very sick and thinks she was drugged at the bar last night. She elaborates and she goes on to say, I had to go to the hospital. This is very serious. And she says in January of 2019, and it's important to know that Dr. Bedzricki had not yet made a determination of the cause of death to be tetrahydrozoline poisoning. And the detectives had not told Ms. Kurczewski what that cause of death was because it hadn't been made yet. And yet here she is telling her boyfriend that she's at the hospital and the doctors had her run tests and that she is found to have been poisoned by tetrahydrozoline. She doesn't say eye drops. She doesn't say Visine. She says they found tetrahydrozoline in my system. She tells her boyfriend that this is serious. This can kill you. In July, fast forward to July 9th of 2019, when detectives now tell Ms. Kurczewski that Lynn died of tetrahydrozoline poisoning, she seems shocked and then says, I didn't even know you could die from that. Months after telling her boyfriend, this is serious, you can die from this. Next, to February of June of 2019, the police will tell you all about how they go through people's phones. They went through Scott Craig's phone. They went through Jessy Kurczewski's phones. They went through some other phones, and they download them. And they're good at getting everything they can, including some deleted things. And lo and behold, on Ms. Kurczewski's phone, between February and June of 2019, they find a number of documents that she deleted from her phone. The subjects are, quote, criminal poisoning, cyanide poisoning, and household poisons. Those all show in the phone download that they were accessed. I mean, somebody opened them on her phone in July of 2018. Moving to April of 2019. Anthony Poza, who I told you earlier, was like sort of an adopted son to Lynn. He's the other beneficiary on the will. So Ms. Kurczewski has to run everything by him, and he has to sign off on things before she can close the estate. He feels like something's off. He doesn't think something's right, and he asks to see receipts. And a few weeks later, Ms. Kurczewski sends him 52 pages of receipts or invoices. Detective Plennis will talk to you at length about how he went through each one of them. Some of our witnesses will be very fast witnesses who will look at a receipt or an invoice that was given to Anthony Poza, and they will tell you this is not our company's invoice at all. This is completely made up. Detective Plennis looked into all the financials. If Ms. Kurczewski claimed to pay off a credit card of Lynn Hernan, Detective Plennis looked at it and found it to be false. Almost all of these 52 pages are completely false documents that were given to Anthony Poza by Ms. Kurczewski. Conveniently, about a month or less after she purchased Adobe Acrobat on one of her credit cards. That will show you. And finally, more lies. When she talks to detectives in both March and July of 2019, her story changes a number of times, and Detective Hoppy is going to tell you all about those. But even on the scene, I told you before, her initial statement to the scene officer, who just said point blank, "You called this in, Ms. Kurczewski? You're friends with Lynn Hernan? Do you think this could be a suicide?" She doesn't say, "Yes, absolutely. Lynn was suicidal for a long time, and what a tragic ending." She says, "I don't. Yes and no. I don't think she'd leave her cats." In March of 2019, she writes an email to one of the detectives on the case and says in that email she has a hard time believing Lynn would commit suicide. Okay? Now, July of 2019, she's arrested. She's told this is a poisoning and that police now know the medical examiner has deemed this a homicide and they don't think it's a suicide. Now, Ms. Kurczewski starts claiming that Lynn was suicidal for months leading up to October of 2018. She still denies helping in any way or knowing anything about Visine many times. Ultimately, then her story changes again. She says, okay, well, one time I put 2 drops of Visine in a glass of water for her because I just knew that she was drinking Visine. But that's it, that's all. To ultimately stating, again, that quote, she finally gave that water bottle, knowing it had, in the defendant's estimation, 6 bottles of Visine to Lynn Hernan, knowing it could kill her. And walks out of that condo unit, closes the door, and goes shopping on Lynn's dime. And then that leads into a law enforcement goose chase, I'll call it, where Detective Hoppy will tell you, I suspect with some frustration in his voice, about more lies Ms. Kurczewski told law enforcement. Starting with, you guys, there's a recording from Lynn, there's suicide letters, there's all this evidence that'll show I'm not guilty of any of this. There's evidence out there, there's evidence out there. It starts with this storage shed. She says, check a storage shed. Detective Hoppy says, where's the storage shed? And very quickly, Ms. Kurczewski goes, kind of laughing, says, there was never a storage shed. I was going to get a storage shed, never did, but that's what I was going to, but there's no storage shed. So next, she tells Detective Hoppy, we have to check a BMO Harris bank lockbox. And the detectives do, they did before, and they learn that it's empty. There's nothing in there. They also learn that Ms. Kurczewski and her mom, Jennifer Flower, were the last ones to access that bank box, and just so happened to do so on October 4th, 2018, the very day after Lynn died. So when Ms. Kurczewski is telling Detective Hoppy to check the lockbox, she already knows it's empty because she was there, and she was the last one there the day after Lynn died. So that doesn't work. So she now changes to say, well, I buried a lot of stuff in Whitnall Park, kind of by the nature center. And Detective Hoppy will tell you that another detective was out there in Whitnall Park with a metal detector and a shovel. They were trying to use video access to have Ms. Kurczewski tell us, where in the world do we find these things? Spoiler alert, they found nothing. There was no magical, mysterious hole at Whitnall Park. Just more lies from Ms. Kurczewski. And finally, in November of 2019, Ms. Kurczewski is removed by the court as personal representative of Lynn's estate, mostly because of this investigation. She takes that and says, well, now there's a real will I have to file. Almost a year to the day, almost, of filing the actual original will that's notarized by 2 impartial people. Ms. Kurczewski now files a, quote, real will. And wouldn't you believe, it removes Anthony Poza as a beneficiary. You're going to hear from Paul Nowakowski, the Register and Probate of Waukesha County, and you're going to hear from Beth Taylor, an attorney who's done probate work for 25 years. They have never seen somebody file a quote-unquote real will a year after. And they've certainly never heard it being done as a test. Because that's what Ms. Kurczewski says. She says, I filed that will originally, and this was all a test Anthony Poza was supposed to pass. And he failed because he questioned what I spent things on. And lo and behold, she tries to leave herself as the sole beneficiary of what's left of the estate that she stole from. Just more lies. And that leads me, and I think this is my second to last slide. But when we look at all those facts and circumstances, when you're talking about what was Ms. Kurczewski's intent, did she have that intent to kill, and what was her knowledge and intent as it related to the theft, remember the instruction says you have to look at all the facts and circumstances. And here they are pretty simply, I think. Between January of 16 and October 3rd of 2018, Ms. Kurczewski was able to steal $144,000 plus from Lynn Hernan while she was still alive. Ms. Kurczewski got it to a point where Lynn Hernan, as of October 8, 2018, lost almost all of that $250,000, right? It was down to $87. Now that she's worth nothing, her credit cards are maxed out, her bank account, one of them's at $87, another one's at $52. She's worth nothing, unfortunately, to Ms. Kurczewski. But her estate is valued at approximately $150,000. And Ms. Kurczewski helps herself to $87,000 of that. Lynn Hernan's murder falls so conveniently for Ms. Kurczewski as to when she could maximize her profit off Lynn Hernan. And this is not a suicide. This was intentional homicide. So I come back to what I told you was the heart of this case, Lynn Hernan. And justice for Lynn Hernan here is 3 guilty verdicts for Jessy Kurczewski. And that's what the state is asking you to return here. Thank you.
We'll take another quick stand break. So please rise before we have the defense come on up.
So the defense opening is going to be next. And yeah, my biggest question right now is how she was able to get Lynn to drink a bottle of Visine. Like, I don't know. I just imagine eye drops to be like salty or something. So I just imagine that your water would vastly taste different. And I don't know about you guys, but at least for me, you know, I'm not a water connoisseur or anything, but I do appreciate good water. So whenever my water tastes like stale, if that makes sense, I notice that. So I would imagine you would notice some flavor difference in your water and be like, no, thank you. So I'll be curious to see what they say during the testimonies when they explain further what that was like and whether it was really flavorless.
Attorney Galaviz, do you want the lapel so you don't have to worry about the microphone, or?
Anybody need any water?
So you don't get feedback, why don't you hand Madam Clerk?
Yeah, I gotta get closer. I want to see you all. Thank you for being here. This is day 2 and only maybe 15 to go. Hopefully sooner rather than later. As the prosecution says, we're going to try to get this case done as quick as possible, but not too quick. This case is extremely important to Jessy. And as you sit there, I want you to look at her. She's presumed innocent. As you sit there right there. And don't ever let that thought leave your mind. That she's presumed innocent. No matter what he just said. When he's throwing all this stuff at the wall. To try for you to find her guilty. she's presumed innocent. And that's the jury instruction the judge just read to you. All defendants are presumed innocent. And if you can reconcile under reasonable hypothesis that she's innocent, you have to, of all the charges. If there's any kind of hypothesis, reasonable hypothesis that she's innocent, you gotta find her not guilty. And I hope you understand that. As you sit here every single day, as you listen to their case, I want you to keep in your mind that she's presumed innocent. And never lose that thought as you hear their witnesses. Because in order to find her guilty, under common sense and logic, which you're allowed to do, your common sense and life's experiences, you're going to have to speculate. And the judge just told you can't do that. You're going to have to guess and speculate what Lynn Hernan thought while all this was going on. And if Lynn Hernan was here today, she would say, "Are you crazy, prosecution? That's my daughter that you have sitting there at that desk over there. That's my daughter. She knew everything that I was doing when I was doing this. I loved her. She's my daughter. I've known her since she was 8 or 9 years old. That's how long Lynn knew Jessy, since she was a child." Here's a picture of Lynn and Jessy, a graduation party that Lynn threw for Jessy, high school. And there's more photos of Lynn. See how she's grabbing her in these photos? Look at her, how she's grabbing Jessy. This is my daughter. She's so proud of Jessy. Has her arms around her, a hand on her head. That's who Jessy is to Lynn. Her daughter, even though not by blood. And there's more photos. Same photo. Lynn liked jewelry. She liked getting her nails done and her hair done. But she loved that person that she has her arms around. And there's more photos of Lynn and Jessy. Look how she's holding her. This is my daughter. I'm so proud of her. And them not knowing this about Lynn and Jessy, not knowing the dynamics about Lynn and Jessy, maybe in their view of this, doesn't make sense to them. Why Lynn would give Jessy all this money, why a mother would give their daughter or their son money. And as he said, he's correct. Lynn had 2 groups of friends. She had Jennifer and Jessy, and then she had Keith, James, Corrine, and Anthony. But the problem was with what he told you is we all have circles in our lives. Circles. Where we only keep a few people in our circle. And only these few people that we have in our circle, the people that know our secrets. That we talk to every day and share everything with. When we're not feeling good or feeling happiness and sadness. And that was Jennifer and Jessy. She was in Lynn's circle. When Lynn needed help, she called on them. Every single time. When Lynn needed help, she called on Jennifer. Jennifer's like her best friend. And Jessy became her best friend. When Lynn needed to move, in 2009, Jennifer helped her and Jennifer's boyfriend, Gary Verdon. She didn't call Keith, James, Anthony, or Kareem. Who do you call when you move? Your friends, your closest friends or relatives. That's who she called, Jennifer. When Lynn needed to move into this condo, who did she call? Jennifer and Gary Verdin. She didn't call James, Keith, Corrine, or Anthony. They didn't help her. When Lynn's mother died in 2013, who did she call to help her drive to Madison and help clean up her mother's place and get it ready to sell? Jennifer and Gary. They drove to Madison and helped Lynn clean out her mother's house. She didn't call these four other people. They weren't in her circle. That inner circle. And their documents that they gave us, he's in the proof. Her bank account. Lynn had all this money in two bank accounts. Her checking account and her money market account. Who was on her account with her? Joint. Jennifer. Jennifer Flower. That was her checking account. Jennifer was joint on that account. She loved Jennifer. Her money market account. Again, she had a lot of money in the money market account. Who was on that account? Jennifer. When you have a joint account, who do you put on the account again? Your husband? Your wife? Here, Lynn didn't have anybody yet. She had Jennifer. Jennifer, it's like together. Lynn needed help, Jennifer helped her. When Jennifer needed help, Lynn helped her. When Jessy needed help, Lynn helped her because she loved, that's her daughter. Anthony and Corinne, they didn't need help, they had money. This case, as the state's kind of said, during this time, which doesn't make sense to them, is Lynn was on disability, full disability. She had all this money, and she was receiving food stamps. She was getting full insurance and food stamps during this time, since 2009. And that was real important to Lynn, not to lose that. And you can lose it, depends upon how much money you make, money you have in your accounts. Because you're not supposed to get food stamps and full disability. You're not supposed to get disability and food stamps when you got a lot of money. Because why do we want to pay for somebody who's got a lot of money for their insurance and food stamps? Taxpayers. Lynn was on food stamps until she died with all this money. From the moment she inherited all this money till she died. But this is a case where they see a suicide. Can you give me the next slide? Lynn liked her vodka. And when she died on October 3rd, 2018, she had alcohol in her system. I'm not saying she's a bad person. She just liked that vodka. She also liked Visine. I have no idea why. Why somebody would put Visine in their alcohol or Visine in water. I don't know why people smoke marijuana. I don't know why people do heroin. I don't know why people do cocaine. I don't know why people do fentanyl. I don't get it. But people like doing it. That stuff doesn't make sense to me, why people want to put that in their body. Lynn liked to put Visine and vodka and water. Why? Who knows? I don't know. Like, I don't know why people do heroin and cocaine. But they like doing it. When Lynn passed away, they talk about, and I want you to hold him to this prosecutor, when he came up here and said, the tetrahydrozoline, the Visine killed Lynn. You hold him to that when he came up here. That's what killed her. You know, to this day, but no one's ever died from Visine. Ever. On planet Earth. No one, not one person's ever died from Visine, tetrahydrozoline poisoning. It's never happened. And I learned during this case, it's kind of like marijuana. You know, you can smoke blunt after blunt after blunt after blunt after blunt, and it can't kill you. The ingredients of marijuana. And I learned it through this case. That you can smoke all day, every day, marijuana, it can't kill you. Apparently something with your body. And it's like that with Visine. It can't kill you.
Judge, I'm going to object. That's not what any of the evidence is going to come in to say.
Attorney Galaviz, rephrase.
Well, we'll see.
These are opening statements, not arguments. Save that for your closing.
But when they arrived on the scene, this is what they found at the scene. Clozapine, the one in the middle, I wouldn't be able to say it. Nifedipine. They found more prescription drugs. Empty bottles. A closer look at clozapine, that was empty. More bottles. Baclofen. They found a lot of empty prescription bottles. You know why they were empty? They were inside Lynn. She had about 25 to 30 prescription pills in her system. And she was only supposed to have 5 or 6. And they can't see that as a suicide? When you're only supposed to take 5 or 6 and you get about 25 to 30? You know that baclofen she's not even supposed to have in her system. And she had about 10 to 15 of those pills in her system. That clozapine, she wasn't even supposed to have that in her system. And she had about 10 of those pills. That nifedipine, she was supposed to have that in her system, but not to the volume that she had. She was only supposed to have 1 or 2 in her system, and she had about 7. And you'll hear from people, clozapine kills people. Baclofen kills people. Nifedipine kills people. Reported suicides with those 3 pills. And she had a boatload of that in her system. And they're saying that the Visine killed her, not these 25 to 30 other pills that she had in her system, that she took, along with the alcohol. Again, more trust Lynn had in Jessy. Here's a living well. April 20th, 2018. Who did she name on the well? Jessy. And the lockbox at the bank? Jessy. Lynn died October 3rd, 2018. That's the responsibility, that connection they had, Jessy and Lynn. Do you see Anthony's name on there, or Keith, or Corrine? Jessy. You know why? Because Jessy was the one that bought her, did all her shopping, took her to the hospital. If she had a medical appointment, Jessy took her. Jessy would come to her house and change her and clean her. When Lynn would have mistakes, Jessy was the one that she would call all the time. You can have Scott Craig's going to tell you, Lynn was always calling her, like almost every single day. Jessy had to drive from Milwaukee to Pewaukee to take care of Lynn. And you can say Jessy ended up quitting her job in June to take care of Lynn. Because Jessy was the only person she trusted. Jennifer was living somewhere else in Milwaukee, but Jessy quit her job to take care of her. And as we all know, taking care of somebody who's in that state of mind is not easy. But Jessy would do all the shopping for her, cleaning, taking her to doctor's appointments, back and forth, back and forth. Because, again, she's in that circle. Next. I don't know if you can shorten that, but this. Yeah, can you move it a little bit? This is Lynn. See the date this license was issued? June 21st, 2018. During this whole time that this is happening, that they're claiming that this is happening. Lynn went and got her license renewed.
Not that good at that, apparently. Here we go.
And on the driver's license, you see that she weighed 150 pounds, give or take. On the autopsy, she weighed 251 pounds. From June to October. She got real sick. We're going to bring in hospital records. We'll tell you how sick she got and how many times she had to go to the hospital. Lynn was really sick and depressed. And you saw the way she was done up with the hair and nails and jewelry. She didn't look like that anymore. And she didn't want anybody to her house anymore. She didn't want any more visitors because she didn't look, in her mind, the same. She might have looked beautiful to Jessy, but Lynn didn't think she looked beautiful to other people. And you're going to hear her neighbor testify to that. Her name is Jean Tennell, that Lynn became hidden in her home. She was depressed. Next slide, please. This is a side around, you can see it, but it basically proves that Lynn was the cyclobenzaprine. She asked, the doctor took her off of it in the beginning of January 2018. So she shouldn't even have had it in her system in October. She stopped taking it in 2018. And the next slide will be baclofen. She stopped taking it in March of 2018. She shouldn't even have had it in her system in October of 2018. Why would she take it if she stopped taking it at the beginning of the year? In such volumes of baclofen. She's only supposed to take one a day. She had 10 to 15 in her system. Like cyclobenzaprine, why would she take it? She told her she stopped taking it. Because she wants to kill herself. She wants to die. She doesn't like life. Doesn't make sense to them, but shooting yourself with a gun doesn't make sense to me. Jumping off a building doesn't make sense to me. Stepping in front of a moving train doesn't make sense to me. Suicide doesn't make sense to us who like living. But for somebody who's depressed and tired, why do they want to take their life? I have no idea. But Lynn did for some reason on October 3rd, 2018. Why does she have 25 to 30 pills in her system? They don't think that's a suicide? That must have been the tetrahydrozoline. Next slide, please. They talk about eye drops, and every time Lynn went to the doctor, every time since 2017 and 18, she went to the doctor a lot of times. Pain management, Aurora, Waukesha. She always complained about her eyes. She had to take eye drops. Every single time you'll see it on her lab after medical report, eye drops, complaint of eye drops, pain in my eyes. And they didn't understand why she was always buying Visine. She was drinking it and using it. She needed eye drops. According to the hospital records, it's not something Jessy made up. It's in the hospital records. You'll see Aurora, pain management, Waukesha, eye drops. Complaining about pain in her eyes. Next slide, please. The medical examiner said tetrahydrozoline was what killed her. And she was also using these other baclofen. She wasn't using them. She shouldn't have had baclofen in her system again. She shouldn't have had these drugs, these other drugs. They're basically saying she took these voluntarily, these other 25 to 30 pills. She took those voluntarily, along with the alcohol. But the tetrahydrozoline, no, she didn't take that voluntarily. That doesn't even make sense. You're saying she took 25 to 30 pills voluntarily? Again, 2 of them that she shouldn't have had in her system, but the Visine did it. Next slide, please. Again, these are all her prescription pills that we found that were found on the scene. That's just one of two pages that were found at the scene. Next slide. Also, it doesn't make sense. They're saying that Jessy set this up. You know, remember when officers arrived on the scene? Do you think this was a suicide? Do you think Jessy would be jumping up and down? Yes. It's a suicide. This is definitely a suicide. Yes. You know what she said? She goes, I don't know. I don't think so. She said, I don't know. You don't want to think the worst, but you know, she would have been saying, yeah, for sure. She did. It was a suicide, but Jessy was being honest. I don't know. And you think if she would have set it up, and according to them, the Visine is in that water bottle, why would she leave it there at the scene with her fingerprints all over it? You know, it's like shooting somebody with a gun and then leaving the gun on the scene and running away so they can find the gun and your fingerprints on it. Why in the world would she leave the bottle of Visine right there so people can find it with her fingerprints on it? If that was actually what killed her. Next slide, please. I want to touch a little bit about the finances, and they're going to mention about these checks, and you're going to hear, and I'm going to, with their witnesses, tell you that Lynn went to the bank a lot of times. When all this was going on, and her checks were being used, her checks were being given to Jessy, her charge cards were being used by Lynn and Jessy, Lynn was always at the bank. She would make deposits, withdrawals. You're going to see them. Lynn would go personally to the bank and go to and do these transactions. You don't think the tellers are telling her about her account, the balances on her account? You don't think she's asking for, like, can I have a balance on my account? That's what happens at a bank. You do a withdrawal or a deposit, you get a balance. Like, Lynn is now aware that Jessy's stealing this money. They were so sure that that these checks were forged by Lynn. They were so sure at the beginning of this case. And Jessy kept telling him, I didn't forge them. Lynn gave them to me. Lynn gave me this money. That he didn't mention, we sent the checks to the FBI to see who wrote those checks. Did he say that? Jessy said, send them to the FBI. I didn't write them. Whatever they say. You know what the FBI said? The analyst? Lynn wrote them. Jessy didn't write them. Didn't write any of those checks. Did he mention that in his opening? I don't think so.
I object to that line. That's not what the FBI report says.
We'll see.
Move on.
And you're going to see also through their documents that they gave us that Lynn applied for a loan in 2018 February for a $30,000 loan or $35,000 at BMO Harris Bank. Why would she apply for a $30,000 loan if she thought she had all this money in her bank? Why in the world would she apply for $30,000? If she had all this money in her checking account and all this money in her market account, why would she need a loan? She was denied. The bank denied her she had all this money in her account. Why would the bank deny her? And then she tried for another loan. Her and Jessy. And I'll be honest with you, her and Jessy filed some fraudulent documents to get this other loan through Wells Fargo. Lynn and Jessy together, they applied, falsified Lynn's earnings, and she got that loan, Jessy and Lynn. But Lynn knew about it. Lynn had to go to the bank, Wells Fargo, and sign for that loan before they could get the money. Jessy and Lynn in front of the, Lynn was with, they were together to Wells Fargo Bank to sign for that loan, March 8, 2018. Wells Fargo in Pewaukee. Again, Lynn loved Jessy. That was her daughter. She was in that circle. If Lynn was here, she wouldn't believe that Jessy's sitting over there to start with. Had she known this was going to happen, I think she would have did something different. I don't think, never in her wildest dream would she ever think Jessy would get arrested for a suicide that Lynn committed, or being charged with money that Lynn gave to her. Jessy's innocent. You know, when he talked about that, the people from probate said, "We never seen this will like this." You know what the medical examiner's going to tell you? I've never seen tetrahydrozoline before either. This is my first time ever. This is when she gets up there and testifies. She goes, "I've never ever seen tetrahydrozoline. I had to research it and talk to people and read literature about it from the experts." And one of those experts is named Henry Speller, leading expert in the world on tetrahydrozoline poisoning. And you're going to hear from him. We're going to bring him in. Literature that the medical examiner read. And you're going to hear from Mr. Speller about tetrahydrozoline poisoning. She's innocent. Find her not guilty.
So yeah, the defense attorney's way of trying to discredit everything is to simply say it doesn't make sense, which it's just his go-to response so much that even when he's talking about his own arguments, right, he says self-inflicted harm doesn't make sense, but yet that's his argument, that's his defense, is that it was self-inflicted. So he almost gets himself tied up in his own quick response with, it doesn't make sense. His also other favorite thing to say is we'll see, which is extremely dismissive.
Same situation with Miss Michelson, I'd be asking that she be released from her subpoena.
Any objection?
No.
All right, that request is granted.
Thank you. The state would next call Tabitha Kooks.
All right. Good afternoon, Ms. Kooks. If you would please make your way to the witness stand, which is all the way to the front of the courtroom. It is up a riser.
B-I-T-H-A, Kookas, K as in King, U as in Union, K as in King, E as in Edward, S as in Sam.
Thank you for correcting how we said your name. My apologies. Go ahead, your witness.
Thank you. Ms. Kookas, were you previously employed as a deputy medical examiner here in Waukesha County?
That's correct.
And how long did you work in that capacity?
From February 2015 until November or December of 2021, I believe. It was almost 7 years.
As a deputy medical examiner, can you just explain to the jury what goes along with that?
Absolutely. So, deputy medical examiner in the state or in the county of Waukesha, essentially we have to be the eyes and ears for the medical examiner. Due to the volume of deaths in the county, it's impossible for the pathologist to individually attend each death. So it was our job to triage those cases on what could be released under natural circumstances and what needed further investigation. These cases might come in as phone calls from a hospital or a nursing facility. It would be a death attended by medical personnel, and we could answer questions from the nurses and doctors. Or in this case, it might be something that happened outside of a medical facility, unattended by any personnel, and would require response by our department to the scene. These were what we called scene deaths. We would go to the scene, we would interview anyone that was there. This included law enforcement, paramedics, witnesses, family, friends, those who found the decedent. We would collect evidence, we would document circumstances surrounding the death, we would do a body examination, and we would legally pronounce the death. Then we would determine whether or not this particular death required additional investigation by the pathologist, and if so, we would bring that decedent with us back to the office. We remain custody of the decedent, and then they would often have either an external exam or an autopsy with toxicology testing at the discretion of the pathologist.
A lot going on there, is fair to say. Did you have to undergo any training or education to become a deputy medical examiner?
Yeah, it varies from county to county on what they require. For me personally, I have an undergraduate degree in anthropology and archaeology. I have my master's degree in biological anthropology, which had additional training in death investigation and genocide. And then I also completed a training course at St. Louis University in medical legal death investigation. Additionally, after being hired at Waukesha County, we underwent yearly ongoing education training, conferences, and of course there's on-the-job training that you receive.
Okay. As part of being a deputy medical examiner, I think you might have touched on it, but I want to really emphasize this here. You're involved in death scene investigations, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in those investigations and in death scenes over the time of your about 6 or so years that you were a deputy medical examiner, about how many death scenes did you process?
Through my entire career, I'd say over 600 were scenes, over 1,300 death cases overall.
Okay. As part of those death scenes, and I think you might have touched on it, but again, I want to highlight these things. What sorts of objects or things are you looking for at these scenes?
Sure. So obviously we're looking at the decedent themselves. We're looking at body position. We're looking at things like rigor, which is how stiff the body is. And we're looking at things like lividity, which is the blood pooling after death. That's just an effect of gravity, but we can use these things to determine whether or not the person is in the position that they died in or could have been moved afterwards. We're looking for evidence of medical history, the medications that are on scene, any paperwork. We're also looking at circumstantial evidence that's both surrounding the decedent themselves, but also in their home. Everybody lives differently, but we see a lot of patterns that present over time. So there are indicators of whether or not someone's an alcoholic, whether or not they take care of themselves. Are they home a lot? Do they hardly leave their home? We're using all of these things, I guess, to understand their life and what they may have been going through at the time of their death.
On October 3rd, 2018, were you dispatched to a residence in Waukesha County for a death scene?
Correct.
Was that death scene involving an individual, Lynn Hernan?
Yes.
Okay. What did you first observe when you entered the residence?
Immediately upon entering the residence, you walk into the living room, which was open to the dining and kitchen area. So it was immediately obvious that the decedent was there in a recliner.
Did you ultimately pronounce her deceased?
Correct.
How long does that process take?
I guess it varies. There's a few steps involved that we follow per protocol for determining if someone's deceased. We check lividity, we check their body temperature, we check rigor, we check their pupils to see if there's any dilation to touch or light. We look to see if there's any reflex whatsoever. I would estimate the actual body exam itself can be performed in 5 to 10 minutes, But typically, by the time you walk in, you make contact with the police department, you do kind of a sweep of the area to get your bearings, take a few photographs. You're usually looking at 30 minutes or so after you've arrived to where you actually make that time pronouncement.
Okay. In this case, do you recall the time that you pronounced her deceased?
I do not.
Okay. If I was to tell you around, give or take, let's say 6:35 p.m., would that sound about correct?
Sure.
Okay. As part of your investigation, do you take photos of the residents?
We do.
Or where they actually were deceased?
Both. So we want to take photos of the decedent themselves and show their body position. We want to take a close-up photo of their face for identification purposes. We take photos of any objects that are surrounding the area of the decedent, but it's also common to take overall photos of the home. It's essentially a documentation process that allows the doctor to go through our photos as though they were there themselves and get kind of a vibe of what's going on. And then anything that stands out to us, we would also document.
Did you review those photos that you took of this incident before court today?
I did.
Okay. I'm going to have those eventually put on your screen here, starting with Exhibit 7.
Okay.
How many photos are we talking about?
There's 14 originally.
All right, and this will be starting with
Exhibit 7.
number 7.
Yep. Yes.
Are you going to go through them all with her quickly to identify them before we publish, or one by one?
I'm going to go through them all quickly.
All right. Thank you. It's on her screen and obviously not in front of the jury yet.
Okay. Do you see Exhibit 7 on your screen?
I do.
Is this a picture that you took of the decedent, Lynn Hernan?
It is.
Okay. And is that a true and accurate copy of that photo?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit 8, is that also a picture that you took of the residence?
Yes.
Is that a true and accurate copy of the photo that you took?
Yes.
Exhibit 9, is that a photo you took of the residence?
Yes.
Again, is that a true and accurate copy of the photo?
It is.
Exhibit 10, same questions.
Yes. And yes.
Thank you. I'll just I guess I'll ask you at the end, or with all of these, a blanket statement. Are all of these photos that you had taken on this date? Once we get there, I'll ask you that at the end, okay? So let's move on to Exhibit 11. Okay, we can move to 12. Exhibit 12. Exhibit 13. Exhibit 14. Exhibit 15. Exhibit 16. Exhibit 17. Exhibit 18. Exhibit 19. Exhibit 20, and then there's actually a jump in exhibits because we had a minor break. So I'm going to actually show you Exhibit 130 and 131 as well. So again, all blanket questions for these. These are all pictures that you took, correct?
Yes.
And are those true and accurate copies of those pictures?
Yes.
Move Exhibits 7 through 20 into evidence, as well as Exhibits 130 and 131 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
I'd also be asking for permission to publish all of these exhibits.
Exhibits 7 through 20 and 130 and 131 are all received. Permission to publish is granted.
So here's Exhibit 7 on the screen. Again, this is just a picture of the deceased, Lynn Hernan, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 8, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at the front door there and the rest of the room.
What are you looking for in these types of pictures?
I wouldn't say there's always something specific we're looking for. We're kind of trying to just give a profile of what the room looked like. So for instance, putting those two photos together, I can showcase that she was in a position in which she may have been watching television. That might have been an area she spent a lot of time in, and it makes sense that her recliner is pointed towards the television. She also has view of the front door, but I wouldn't say this particular photo is trying to say anything specifically so much as just to showcase the room.
Thank you. Exhibit 9. Is that what Exhibit 9 is as well? Just trying to showcase the whole residence here?
Correct.
Okay. Exhibit 10, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
This is a close-up of an area near her. I'm showcasing that she has multiple medication bottles that are within arm's reach. She has, she clearly smokes. She has an inhaler. She's got items such as pre-moistened towelettes near her. So that can be indicative that someone's spending a lot of time in that particular chair or that particular part of their house because they have daily living things near them. I'm also showing that she has multiple medications that are kind of scattered on her carpet. There's some disorganization going on. There's a spoon out of place. I'm kind of just showcasing how she lived.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit 11 here, what are we looking at?
This is a close-up of the medication bottles that were directly to her left. I'm trying to showcase the names that are on the medications as well as that her name is on each medication.
What are we looking at here in Exhibit 12?
Same thing, this is to the right of the decedent. So I'm showing that there's additional medications that are present, some without their caps on, water bottles, just kind of showing what is within arm's reach or what's near her.
Is this a close-up of that same table?
It is.
And just for the record, I'm referencing Exhibit 13. In Exhibit 14, what are we looking at here?
This is a close-up of her face and as well as the unknown residue that's on her chest.
You said earlier that you did this for about 6 years or so. Is anything strike you as out of the ordinary with this picture?
The residue on her chest, absolutely.
Why?
That's not something I had seen previously. It's not, regardless of what the residue is, whether it's an illicit substance or a prescription medication, that's not an appropriate way to take any medication. There's a lot of large pieces as well as crushed residue. It's difficult to tell from this picture, but I believe the next slide shows a close-up of her mouth in which you can see there's a piece still in the corner of her mouth. So this to me is indicative that at the very least she's taking her medications inappropriately. Even if it's something that you're prescribed, taking a medication inappropriately can cause an intoxication. So anytime we see a unknown residue or unknown substance or improper use of anything, that's a red flag for intoxication and unnatural death.
Exhibit 15, similar question.
Same thing, just a different angle. This picture shows a little bit better that there is part of a tablet that's still in her mouth, and then just a different angle or different showcase of the residue. This photo does a better job of highlighting that it's multicolored, so I would imagine that to mean multiple different tablets. Most tablets don't come with more than one color, so we have different tablets that are likely crushed here.
You were talking about a drug intoxication or those types of terms. Is this layout and the way those drugs are situated on an individual typical of a medication suicide?
No, I would say that's atypical. Usually when people overdose on their medications, they still swallow them. I have had cases where people were snorting particular medications to get that effect faster. But I would imagine most of us would have a very difficult time trying to snort off of our own chest. So that doesn't really explain that for me. There's also some very large pieces there that would be difficult to snort. So, and with the piece in her mouth, then it looks more like she's eating them. And I don't have an explanation for why, if she was eating them, so much would be on her chest.
In Exhibit 16 here, what are we looking at?
This is a pile of documents that was in the living room directly to the right of the decedent. We do typically take photographs of anything that looks to be important. It's not atypical for people who commit suicide to leave important information out, passcodes, passwords for their bank statements, things like that. So she had a lot of information, a lot of paperwork that was in a pile in her living room. This particular piece of paper is her power of living will. So I was taking a photograph of that for its importance and also in an attempt to locate next of kin.
And Exhibit 17, what are we looking at here?
It looks like I pulled that piece of paper out and then took a full photograph. I mean, originally, the first photograph is finding it in situ, and then this photograph is taking an entire photo of the piece of paper.
What are we looking at in Exhibit 18?
It's typical for us to take photographs of driver's license for identification purposes, make sure we have the name spelled correctly, the address.
Perfect. So you were the one that would have been taking that picture?
Yes.
Okay. Exhibit 19, what is this photo?
This is in her bedroom. This is a locked safe that was found in that position. It was open upon my arrival, and there appears to be another copy of the will inside.
Do you recall if there was anything else notable in her bedroom?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Is that power of living will essentially the same document that you would have located next to her in the living room?
It appeared to be the same, yes.
In Exhibit 20, what are we looking at here?
We typically document valuables, so I'm just taking a photograph of the jewelry that she's wearing.
Why do you do that?
For evidence purposes, that way if, say, she goes to the funeral home and family comes forward and says they're missing a giant sapphire ring, I can go back to my photographs and show that she wasn't wearing that particular piece of jewelry upon my taking custody of her. So it's basically just a trail of evidence for anything that might be deemed valuable.
So when the ME's office takes her body, her jewelry stays with her, correct?
Yes, anything that's on her is going to come with her to the medical examiner's office.
Okay, thank you. 130, I believe, is that just a kind of opposite of spectrum of
another
photo?
view showcasing the various pills and capsules that are on the floor. Saltine crackers can be indicative that someone's not feeling well, just showcasing what's near her.
Okay. And lastly, 131. What are we looking at in this picture?
I presume that is where she crushed whatever was on her chest. It's a plate with medication tap, like that's the cap to a medication bottle, and this appears to be an unknown powdery substance left behind on a plate.
Okay. When you went throughout the residence, did you go into the garage? Do you recall?
I don't recall going into the garage.
Okay. There's obviously the pill bottles from one of the earlier exhibits. Mm-hmm. Did you take inventory of the medication that was found in the pill bottles?
Once I took them back to the medical examiner's office, I did.
Why is that helpful?
That's our protocol. It can show things like whether or not they're taking their medication appropriately. You know, if not as many pills are in the bottle as should be. If there's too many in the bottle, then we're not taking our prescription medication. For her in particular, I recall some of those bottles being rather outdated. So she had a collection of medications that would not have correlated to the month of her death. So that could be indicative that she's saving her medications. It could be indicative that she didn't take them appropriately. It could be indicative that she's been living in a state where she's been primarily on that recliner and in that living room ill for some time.
And again, is this inventory of that medication, is that important to your office in determining the cause and manner of death?
That could be viewed either way. On the one hand, no, because all that really matters is what the toxicology shows. All that really matters is what's in the decedent's bloodstream at the time of death, not necessarily what's there. And on the other hand, sometimes we take that medication back and we find another doctor's name that we can use to track down additional medical history, or it helps us, answer questions. The family might come back and ask us, is she taking her medications? Should we have made her take her medications? And the counts might help us answer those questions. So I think it's important for the overall investigation, but not necessarily important for cause and manner of death.
While you were the one that inventoried the medication, actually, can you say where those missing pills would have been potentially?
What do you, I don't understand.
So if she doesn't have the correct amount of prescription drug in the bottle, would you be able to say where those pills are?
No, she could have, no.
And I kind of want to go back a little bit to Exhibit 131. So you're under the assumption that this is crushed medication, correct?
It appears to be some sort of crushed unknown substance.
Do you know how that medication or substance got crushed?
Object speculation.
Overruled.
You can answer that.
I could theorize, but no, I don't know for certain. There was an explanation that was given to me by...
Object to hearsay. It's going to call for hearsay.
The original question was answered, so I'll sustain the objection as being narrative, and you may ask your next question.
Thank you. As part of taking inventory, though, of medications, so we're going to kind of jump back to that. Does the medical examiner's office have that in their file?
Yes.
Okay. And did you review that property or inventory before court today?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you done with the photos? Thank you.
Yes. And I believe those are marked as exhibits 21 and 22.
All right, you can show them to the witness first.
We're showing you exhibit 21. Can you just describe that?
It's not up on our screen just yet. There's a delay sometimes. It's up now.
Okay. Can you describe exhibit 21?
It's an inventory of the medications that I took custody of from the scene.
And is that a true and accurate copy of that?
Yes.
Okay. I believe there's actually 2 pages of that. I just want to confirm that.
Yes.
That's a different exhibit.
This is the second page.
It is? Okay.
All right. Now
Sorry
moving
about that.
to exhibit 22. Can you describe what that is?
It's an inventory of medication from the scene.
Okay.
It's an inventory of things that were not found within a medication bottle that I would have used an outside source to identify that particular medication to the best of my ability.
And again, that's a true and accurate copy of what would be in the medical examiner's file.
Yes.
Looking at Exhibit 22, I don't see a drug or talk of any eye drops or Visine. Would you have noted that on this exhibit?
No.
Okay. Speaking of that, though, you were making notes of things on the scene. You were taking photos of items that were on the scene. Do you recall any eye drops or Visine?
Not that I recall.
Okay. And just for the record, Your Honor, move exhibits 21 and 22 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
Exhibits 21 and 22 are received.
Moving forward in this investigation, did you have any contact with Jessy Kurczewski?
Via phone.
Okay, when did that take place?
The night of the death, after I returned back to the medical examiner's office, I did reach out to her.
So you didn't make any contact with Ms. Kurczewski on scene?
She was no longer present.
Did that strike you as odd?
Yes.
Object.
Sustained. I'll strike the answer, lack of foundation.
So Ms. Kurczewski didn't remain on scene, correct?
Correct.
And in your 6 years of being a deputy medical examiner, is it common for individuals who are related or friends or family to stay on scene of these investigations?
Yes, they usually stay on scene.
Okay. In this case, again, Ms. Kurczewski didn't stay on scene. Did that strike you as odd?
Yes.
So you did have contact, though, with her over the phone later that night, correct?
Correct.
What did you talk about?
We talked about Ms. Hernan's medical history, why Ms. Kurczewski was involved in visiting her often, her behavior, just kind of background information about the decedent themselves.
All right. Moving forward, did you have any further communication with Ms. Kurczewski?
I believe she called the office a few times after that.
Okay, what was she calling the office about?
She wanted the cause and manner of death.
All right. Do you recall when that was?
I do not.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness to refresh her recollection with her report? I don't have a physical exhibit or anything like that.
Sure. Please show the document to the defense first.
And just to clarify the record, it's actually the case call log, not her investigative report.
All right, please make sure you mark it for identification purposes.
Okay. Ms. Kukas, can you read out to the jury?
Hold on, you need to establish she knows what that is.
Okay, apologize. Do you recall looking at this case call log before court today?
I do.
Is that a true and accurate copy of that case call log?
Yes.
And again, I'll get that marked as an exhibit later, but you would have inputted that information in there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to read off to the jury in terms of the call log, the second call log down from the top.
Object to her reading from this document. You can refresh her recollection
Apologize.
and ask her the question.
Sustained.
If you could just review that document and then we can go from there.
I recall
Okay.
this.
So what was the topic of
Hold
that?
on, just turn it over.
I can
I want her to testify from her memory, not the document at this point.
So what was talked about in the conversations with Ms. Kurczewski?
The follow-up conversations we discussed that there was no cause or manner of death yet determined. Toxicology results had not come back yet, so I didn't have anything to share. Our office was also reached out to by John Friot, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who self-identified.
Object. It's going to call for hearsay.
Sustained. Also.
If you could just continue without talking about Mr. Friot, please.
Okay. Ms. Kurczewski called asking for cause and manner of death, in which I did not have anything to provide her.
Okay. Did she call you in October of 2018?
Yes.
Then did she call the medical examiner's office in January and February as well?
That sounds correct.
Okay. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
All right, before cross, please go ahead and mark that exhibit, just for identification purposes.
Your Honor, we're going to have that brought in. The copy that I had, I briefly made a note on it, so that's going to be marked as Exhibit 212 on a fresh copy, though.
Exhibit 212, all right, thank you. All right, Attorney Kugler, will you be doing cross?
I will.
Go ahead.
If I could get my equipment to be proper. Good afternoon. Is it Kooks?
Kukas.
Kookas? Okay. Thanks. And what do you do for work at this time?
I manage a music lounge and event center.
Any particular reason you left the medical examiner's office?
No.
Just a change of career?
Yes.
When you received calls, you mentioned that Jessy called the office 3 times over the course of a few months, right?
That sounds correct.
That's not unusual for people to call the medical examiner's office to find out if you have any information, is it?
No, it's not.
People do it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yet they want to know if you've determined cause and manner of death yet.
Correct.
You went to the scene of Lynn's death,
Yes.
and you made observations at the scene,
Yes.
and you collected evidence,
Yes.
and you took photographs.
Yes.
And then you also asked a police officer or a deputy sheriff to also take photographs?
I would not request that of the police department. They would do that on their own.
So you didn't do that here? You didn't ask them to take photographs?
No, I don't recall asking them to perform any particular duties.
And that's not something you would do. If you wanted a photograph, you take it yourself.
Correct.
And that's what you did here?
Yes.
Okay. And anything that you thought was significant, you took a photograph of?
Yes.
And anything that you thought was should be gathered for evidence for your purposes, cause and manner of death, you took those things?
If it fell within our jurisdiction, yes.
For example, the medications, you gathered all those up?
I did.
And those were medications we saw on the tables to Lynn's right and to her left, is that right?
Yes.
And also medications you found on the floor?
Yes.
And did you go gather medications from her medicine chest?
I can't recall if it was medications from her chest specifically. I do believe there were some medications found in her purse in her bedroom that were also collected. So any medications that were prescription, I would have collected had I found them.
And you found the ones in her purse?
Yes.
And so you went and you looked through her purse?
Absolutely.
Is that where you found her driver's license?
The driver's license had already been procured by the police department upon my arrival, so they provided me with that.
You're not sure where they found it?
I could not testify to that.
And you looked into her medical history too, a
Yes.
little bit. And you saw medical paperwork right there at her residence.
I did.
And you noted that she had proctocolitis?
I don't recall making that determination.
Do you want to see your report?
Sure.
I'll bring up what we've marked as Exhibit 525.
I'm sorry, what was the number?
I think it's 525. Yes, 525, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will we show that to the witness?
It takes a moment, so be patient. It's up now.
All right. So I'm showing you, you see it's marked 525. You see the sticker on there at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes,
And is this your report?
it is.
All right. I'm moving down to page 2. You have a subject, or I see your signature at the bottom of page 2. Is that your signature?
That is.
And I see on here confidential medical history. Did you input that information?
I did.
And so when you looked at her, does this refresh your recollection?
Yes, it looks like a list of diagnoses that her paperwork indicated.
So what diagnoses did you observe for Miss Hernan?
None of those diagnoses would have been observable in her deceased state.
Fair enough. What did you observe paperwork to show? What did you read on paperwork for diagnosis for Lynn Hernan?
The list of diagnoses that I have listed here would have been gathered from her medical paperwork.
Sure. Can you tell the jury what they are?
Listing off proctocolitis, hypertension, acute kidney failure, nausea with vomiting, hypercalcemia, hyponatremia, abdominal pain, elevated liver function, metabolic acidosis, urinary retention, sinus tachycardia, Clostridium difficile, and renal failure.
And then there was also a note in her paperwork, wasn't there, about a palliative care encounter?
There was.
And when somebody is talking to somebody from palliative care, that's end-of-life care.
It's the stage right before that, yes.
And when somebody is possibly going to go into hospice.
Yes.
Do you recall what the paper was specifically that you read about the palliative care?
I believe it was a discharge summary, perhaps, from her last hospital visit.
And it's true she had just gotten out of the hospital a few days earlier, right?
I can't tell you how soon it was, but it was recent, yes.
And then we'll move for admission, Your Honor, of Exhibit 525 and request to publish this page.
Any objection?
I'm not objecting.
Exhibit 525 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
It takes a minute for things to pop up on screens. There we go.
Is it in the jury box yet? No. There's a little bit of a delay sometimes with that. Can be. Someone give me a thumbs up when you get it in the jury box as well. I promise it'll be there. It can be 30 seconds.
Still nothing in the jury. There we go.
Thank you. All right. Lots of thumbs up.
Thank you. All right. So this is what you were reading from, is that right?
Correct.
And it lists the paperwork, the medical diagnosis for Lynn that you observed on paperwork.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Also lists the medications that you collected from the residents, true?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the purposes or side effects and things like that for medications, generally speaking?
Generally?
For example, you listed alprazolam. Is that the first one you listed?
It appears to be.
Okay. Well, you're looking at it, aren't you?
Yes, that's the first one I listed.
All right. And that's a sedative, isn't it?
I believe that's one of the side effects it can have, yes.
Isn't that why people are given it, for anxiety?
That's beyond my scope. I don't prescribe medications.
Okay. And would you agree that this particular medication can cause somebody as a side effect to become paranoid or to have suicidal ideations?
That's
I don't know how she can answer that. She just talked about her lack of knowledge.
I'll
with this.
sustain it as to lack of foundation and qualifications.
So that's what I was asking you before, so I'm going to be clear. If I ask you questions about these medications, will you know? Will you know what they're for?
That's beyond my scope.
So you don't know what any of these are?
I might know what some of them are typically used for, but I could not testify as to why she was prescribed them or someone else might be.
You don't know whether any of them are dangerous or not dangerous? You don't have information?
Define dangerous or not dangerous.
Dangerous, something that somebody could, for example, take too many of and overdose, die.
There's a lot of medications that can be prescribed and over the counter that can happen with.
Well, I wasn't talking about over-the-counter medications. I'm talking about Lynn Hernan's confidential medications. Are you able to testify to any, whether if taken too many of, can cause somebody to die from an overdose?
No, I think that's better.
Hold on.
Cause for speculation.
No, the question was asked, do you know? And so she may answer. Go ahead.
No, I think that's beyond my scope. It's for a doctor to determine whether or not something's an intoxication.
Okay. Now, when you were at the scene, well, I'm going to continue to go through some things in your report. You arrived at the scene at 18:10 hours.
Yes.
That's 6:10, right?
PM, correct.
6:10 p.m.
Attorney Kukler, do you still need the document up, or are you done with publishing what you needed to the jury?
For the moment, I'm done. Thank you. It could come down.
As you noticed, I like to bring the documents down and continue with the testimony if they're not needed, and I've done that for both sides, so go ahead.
Did you talk to Jessy at the scene?
No.
So all the information that you put in your report about what Jessy said, did that come from someone else?
Correct. If it's, it depends on the heading that's underneath there. So we do interview anybody that's there, including law enforcement. So they would have provided me with what she may have told them at scene to give a background, but then the information under non-confidential history, which outlines my conversation with Jessy, occurred via telephone after I arrived back to the office.
So my question for you is, in your report, when you put history of events, that Jessy stops by Lynn's home 2 to 3 times a day to assist her, that Lynn didn't seem herself lately, struggling with her mood, that Lynn, those statements, you got those from law enforcement?
Correct. History of events is my interview with law enforcement.
And so when the information that you put in here about Lynn ripping up medical bills or leaving her will out again, that came from law enforcement?
If it's in that same section, yes.
And you've reviewed your report before testifying here?
Yes.
I would like to finish the question first. You reviewed your report before testifying here?
Yes.
So you know that that's in your report?
I know it's in that section, as well as I believe the second section under non-confidential history.
And part of your history of events is that Lynn has a history of abusing prescription medication.
I can't recall. I can't say I memorized my report.
Okay, that's all right. Judge, we'd like to show it to the witness.
Perfect.
Presume reviewing your report will refresh your recollection?
Yes, please.
All right, go ahead.
I'm just going to show it to you, not to the jury. If you would review what's on your screen, history of events, read it to yourself and let me know once you've read that paragraph. did take that down from the witness. Did that refresh your recollection?
It did.
So is it accurate that you have in your report that Lynn has a history of abusing prescription medications?
That was information that the police gave me.
I asked you if that's in your report.
It is in my report.
And in your report, did you also indicate that she, meaning Lynn, crushes her pills due to issues swallowing?
Yes.
That Lynn has been unwell for several years?
Yes.
That doctors have been unable to diagnose her with a definitive illness?
Correct.
And that when Jessy was asked by police if she thought Lynn was suicidal, she was unsure?
Correct.
You indicated in your report that it was a tidy, clean condo that Lynn lived in.
Yes.
How many bedrooms in that condo?
I believe there was one bedroom.
How many bathrooms?
I believe there was one bathroom.
And you said, I think, that you went in the bedroom because that's where you found the prescription in Lynn's purse,
Correct.
or some prescriptions.
Yes.
How many were in her purse?
I don't recall.
Do you know which ones specifically you found in her purse?
I do not.
Is there any way we can look at the medication log and determine which were in her purse and which were somewhere else?
It may say in the log where I found them specifically, but that would be the only indication.
Okay. And the observations you made at the scene were that there were 3 tables to Lynn's left cluttered with multiple prescription medications.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring up, I'd like to show the photographs to the witness that have already been admitted into evidence.
So you're talking about
States
exhibits 7 through 20 and 130 and 131.
No, I thought that state started showing, did they not show the scene photos?
Yes, those are exhibits 7 through 20 and 130 and 131.
I see. Okay, well then, I will start there. Thank you, Judge.
Sure.
Okay,
Would you like to publish while you're doing this?
I
as
would.
well?
I'd like to show them to the jury and talk about each photo with the witness.
Go ahead.
So I am showing you what's marked and previously admitted as Exhibit 7. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
And that's how you saw Lynn when you arrived at the scene, is that right?
Correct.
And you said that you take a look at things to observe the scene and make sure that there's no evidence that a person's been moved. And as you looked at Lynn, it didn't look like she had been moved. True?
That's correct.
And that's the TV, and you just wanted us to see that because you wanted to see that she was facing the TV and she could also see who was coming in and out of the condominium. Is that right?
That's fair to say.
And I wish I could do this easier.
If you want to have us stop publishing for a moment, you could open each of them up and then click from one to the next.
Oh, I see.
Would you like to do that?
How do I do that?
Open each one in, I think you're in Adobe, and then click the tabs on top.
Okay.
Why
we'll
don't
do
we
that.
we'll stop publishing for a moment.
What do I do?
In the control key, it's like not that way, hit control.
Yes, perhaps.
Okay, great. And there we can see some pills on the floor, is that right?
Yes.
Some that seem to have spilled out of bottles, right?
Yes, perhaps.
Or
I can't testify to how they got there, but there are capsules and tablets on the floor.
and we can see an open prescription bottle on the floor too, can't we?
Yep,
It's missing the lid.
it is.
And we see an ashtray with one finished cigarette and one ready to go, or maybe was just smoked for a minute.
Appears so, yes.
And there's lighters. There appears that Lynn smoked cigarettes.
Yes.
Did you take pictures of her cigarette or her packs of cigarettes?
I don't believe I did.
And now the pills are in a little different position now on that same table. Did you move them to put them in like a semicircle so you could get a better picture of them?
Yes, I'm trying to show the names of the medications and her name on each bottle.
And so when we see what's marked Exhibit 11, that's not how you found them, that's how you wanted to demonstrate them.
That was to make them more readable. The way they were found was in the original first few photos.
Right. This is how you put them up for display.
Correct.
Okay. And this is another table to the right side of Lynn that you took a picture of because it shows more pill bottles.
Correct.
One that doesn't have a lid on it. True?
That's true.
And this is Exhibit 12.
And that was 12. I'll confirm that for you.
And Exhibit 13, is that just a close-up of the same thing?
Yes.
And you took a close-up for what reason on this picture?
I think I'm just trying to see if I can get the names to be made out in the photograph. Maybe I thought the first one came out a little blurry.
And when you looked at all the pill bottles here, all the pill bottles were in the name of Lynn Hernan, right?
As I recall, yes.
If you had seen pill bottles for someone else, you would have noted it.
Yes.
That would have been a big red flag, right?
I would have noted that.
All right. And let's try again. And Exhibit 14, this is a close-up of Lynn. She has a chain around her neck, right?
Yes.
And you later on took a closer look at that and determined those are her father's dog tags, right?
Yes.
From the military.
Yeah.
Which one has the... I'm going to show you Exhibit 29.
This isn't in evidence.
Let's take it off the screen so she can identify it.
Can you take a look at Exhibit 29?
Oh. It'll take a moment.
And I would note, Your Honor, this is not a photo
Well,
that she took.
She can be questioned about it. She was at the scene. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see Exhibit 29 in front of you?
I can.
Is this, whether you took this photo or not, is this how you remember seeing Lynn in the scene on October 3rd, 2018?
It is.
Now, look at that table to Lynn's left. I know you testified earlier that there were no eye drops at the scene, but do you in fact, now that you take a close look at that table to her left, see a bottle of eye drops next to the toilet paper?
I see what could be eye drops. I can't say for certain what those are.
Okay. I move for admission of Exhibit 29 and ask to publish.
Any objection?
I am objecting. This is not a photo that this witness took.
Overruled. Exhibit 29 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
can everybody see Exhibit 29 now? No? Okay. Can see it now? Okay. And so this is how you remember the scene. Now that you look at this is accurate.
It appears.
And you didn't make a note of the drops, whatever those drops were, anywhere in your report, true?
That's true.
And would it be fair to say that okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Would it be fair to say that you were not thinking about eye drops when you were at this house on October 3rd, 2018?
That's fair.
And so if there were eye drops around the house, they probably wouldn't have caught your attention.
If there was 1 or 2 bottles like anyone else's house, no, they would not have caught my attention.
And in fact, this didn't catch your attention because until now you didn't really notice it.
Correct.
But those do look like eye drops, do they not?
Could be nasal spray. I really can't say what that is.
Okay. We can take that down, Judge, or Madam Clerk. Now, I didn't see any photographs of wastebaskets. Did you take any?
Not that I recall.
You did make a note that you saw liquor bottles in a wastebasket,
Yes,
but you didn't photograph them.
I did not.
Do you remember if they were vodka?
I do not.
You couldn't tell us today what kind of liquor they were.
No.
Which wastebasket, was it in the kitchen where you saw the liquor
I
bottles?
believe it was the kitchen, yes.
Do you have any knowledge as you sit here today of what else was in that wastebasket?
Nothing that I recall.
What about in the bathroom wastebasket?
Nothing that caught my attention.
In the wastebasket in the living room, do you have any recollection of what was in that?
Nothing that caught my attention.
Because again, really you were focused on medications, mostly.
I was focused on everything in the scene, but unless something appeared out of place, I wouldn't have necessarily documented it.
You said that you, did you bring a medical bag with you to the scene? Did you bring a medical bag with you to the scene?
I brought my backpack. I don't know if I would call it a medical bag.
And that's what you take to scenes, your backpack?
Yes, my scene bag, yes.
Okay, and what do you have in your scene bag?
Various items, gloves. There's probably a pocket knife would have been in it, a tape measure, additional forms, documents in case I needed someone to fill something out, extra paper, tape in case, paper bags that we used often for gunshot wounds.
Do you carry a thermometer with you?
We carry an ear thermometer that we use for babies.
Well, because one of the things you said to the state was that one of the things you do at the scene is you take a temperature.
Of the room, yes. There would have been a room thermometer, not a body thermometer.
Okay, the only body temperature item you have is an ear thermometer.
Yes.
And you didn't take Lynn's temperature.
We typically do not take temperatures of decedents, no.
And again, I'm not really asking generally, I'm just asking about this case.
No, I did not take her body temperature.
Okay. You did take a look at whether or not you started to see, I heard you said rigor, but isn't it rigor mortis?
There's debate on the pronunciation.
Okay, so rigor mortis or rigor mortis, however you want to pronounce it, you took a look at that, right?
I did.
And that's where muscles on a body start to stiffen up, right?
Yes.
And you noted that rigor was present in her jaw and her neck.
That sounds correct.
And in her upper extremities.
That sounds correct.
And there was no rigor yet in her lower extremities or in her stomach area, true?
There wouldn't have been, I don't think we would document Riker in her stomach, but, and not in her lower extremities, no.
I guess I should have been precise, the trunk. You look at the trunk, don't you?
Yes.
It wasn't yet in her trunk or her lower extremities.
No, I don't recall it being in her hips or her legs.
Okay. And you said you're trained in medical death scene investigation. And as part of that, have you been trained in doing that with the Spitz and Fisher? Are you familiar with their teachings in that?
No, I don't recall a specific textbook used.
When you've studied in your death scene investigation, in your training though, and in looking at Riker, you know, do you not, that starts to set in 1 to 2 hours after death.
That's a good average.
Now, you arrived at the house at 6:10.
Yes.
When Riker starts in the face and the jaw, ultimately moving into the trunk, into the lower extremities, that whole process is usually complete in 6, maybe 8 hours. True?
There's a pretty wide range when it comes to looking at rigor mortis. Everything from the temperature of the room, the clothing the decedent is wearing, what kind of material they're on, if they're covered with a blanket, all of those things have to be factored in. It starts with smaller muscles and then goes to the larger muscles, so I wouldn't say that it goes to the trunk prior to the legs.
It could go to the legs and then the trunk.
It could.
Sure. And of course, it can vary if you're, for instance, a person is outside in a cold or in a cold area, for example, it might not progress at sort of the normal fashion.
Absolutely.
But you did take the temperature in her condo, it was 79 degrees.
It was.
Okay. So it wasn't cold in her condo.
No, I'd say that's a bit warm.
Depending on a person's health.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
People who sit around a lot and aren't moving a lot get colder.
Very often.
So if we were to look at the Riker that was in Lynn, in her jaw, and her neck, you took a look at her sometime between 6:10 and 6:40.
Yes.
Because it said it took you about a half an hour to do everything that you needed to do at the scene.
Yes.
And so at the point that you saw her, would you agree that the Riker is probably somewhere between 2 and 4 hours?
That's very difficult to put any sort of time frame on. We don't typically give a time frame or an estimated time of actual death.
You wouldn't disagree with literature that indicates that the typical Riker is complete in the lower extremities in somewhere in the 6 to 8 hour range.
I imagine that's what the literature says. It was my job to observe the Riker, and how that was interpreted by the doctor is beyond my scope.
Okay. Have you done any research in that area at all, or any study in that area?
Not particular academic study, no.
You saw water bottles at the scene, or at least a water bottle. You didn't collect that, did you?
No.
How many water bottles were at Lynn's home?
I don't recall.
Do you know if there were any on the kitchen counter?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
When you took pictures of different parts of rooms, you only took limited pictures in rooms, right? You didn't take an overview of all the rooms, like the bedroom.
That's fair.
The bathroom. You didn't do that.
Correct.
At the time, you were focused on medications, it seems like.
I was focused on the decedent and what was surrounding her.
And any medications that you saw elsewhere, you focused on.
Yes, we do typically focus on medications. That's part of our protocol.
You said that Lynn was wearing no bottoms. Is that right?
Correct.
But she had a blanket over her,
Correct.
and she had an absorbent pad of some sort underneath her.
Yes.
Did you take any pictures of the toilet in the bathroom?
I did not.
You learned when you got non-confidential history in your report that, in fact, Lynn was released from the hospital last Friday. Do you remember that?
I recall she had been in the hospital recently.
Do you remember that you indicated in your report she had just been released on Friday?
Yes.
And you indicated that it was recommended that she enter an inpatient rehabilitation facility for physical therapy, but she refused.
Correct.
She also declined recommendation for home health care.
That's what I was told.
She had an appointment yesterday for blood work, but refused to go.
That's what I was told.
Seems like she was pushing back her medical appointments.
That's what I was informed.
And with the non-confidential history, was that also from law enforcement?
No non-confidential history would have come from Ms. Kurczewski.
Okay. And so Ms. Kurczewski told you that Lynn was tired of being ill,
Yes.
that she was afraid of being declared incompetent and put in a nursing home.
Yes.
What you asked her about suicide, Jesse, was uncertain.
Yes.
But she did admit she thinks Lynn takes too many pills,
Yes.
including pain pills and sleeping medication.
That's what she told me.
And that Jesse told you it was common for Lynn to crush medications because of her problems swallowing.
That's what she told me.
Even though you took medications out of Lynn's purse, you didn't take a photograph of the purse.
I don't believe I did.
I don't see it in the photographs.
Correct. So I don't believe I did.
The state said that, or strike that. Did you see, you indicated in your report that you saw some crushed medications on Lynn's chest.
There was something crushed on her chest, yes.
Something crushed on her chest, and some kind of pill, it looked like, part of a pill in her mouth.
Appeared to be some sort of tablet.
You didn't say anything in here about pills in her hair.
No, I don't recall anything in her hair.
If you had seen anything like that in your hair, you would have made a note of it.
I would have.
And again, you noted that she was wearing the dog tag, which bore the name Robert Wallace Hernan.
Yes.
And you learned that was her father,
Yes.
her deceased father.
Correct.
You learned that that you saw and you took a picture of her will, a power of attorney, or living will. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's already been admitted as Exhibit 19, I think. Let me just be sure about that.
Attorney Kugler, I apologize for the interruption, but I need to take a comfort break before we continue. Any of my jurors need to as well. We'll try to at least, yeah, they're shaking their heads. I'm going to take a pause, and then before I bring them back out, we'll talk about how much time with this witness, and I'll make a decision on if we're going to break. All right. All rise for the jury, please.
Okay, so we are, let me just scroll through. Okay, so yeah, we are on to day 2, part 1. So while we were listening to this, I was looking up about eye drops and whether you could taste them or not, because it's been driving me crazy. You know, how can someone drink a whole bottle of it? So with that said, there was another case apparently back in 2018, despite what the defense attorney said about there being no such other case ever of someone dying from eye drops. So anyways, there's this article, and it's apparently an attending physician that did this, and he actually wrote in it, he's like, I'm a trained professional, don't try this at home. And he actually tried eye drops himself, which don't do. And he tried them straight, apparently, like 1 drop on his tongue straight, and said that it was like a vague chemical taste, but nothing overpowering. And then he said that he stirred an entire 15 milliliter bottle of Visine into 8 ounces of purified water and took a sip. He said the water developed a faint, stale, bitter note on the back of his tongue, but nothing that would seem out of place. And he made a joke about nothing that would seem out of place out of drinking Chicago tap water, I guess. But the point being that it wasn't too overwhelming that maybe you would notice unless you were drinking something like Voss water or something fancy and super clean. All right, so let's continue with the examiner. They're going to go over some autopsy photos with her and things like that.
Be seated.
Well, this particular page is more to do with other activities, such as I did 2 presentations in the last couple of years on a national level, and it includes my other memberships and speaking award. But I have published as well.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit. That's further down, isn't it? So, in terms of the page that we're looking at, could you tell the jury a little bit about that most recent presentation that you gave?
Just this, in June of this year, I did a webinar, national or maybe internationally things, but in general, there's a standard practice.
Ultimately, do you memorialize the autopsy process and conclusions in a report?
Yes.
Is that often referred to as a protocol?
Yes.
I'd like to show just the witness, please, states Exhibit 34. And doctor, again, this is a multiple page exhibit. And I'm going to have Ms. DeValkeneer please scroll slowly through all 8 pages. And Dr. Kurczewski, do you recognize Exhibit 34?
Yes.
What is it?
It's the autopsy report I prepared on Lynn Hernan.
Okay. Is it a fair and accurate copy of that?
Yes.
Okay. I'd move Exhibit 34 into evidence. I'm not asking for permission to publish at this point.
Any objection to 34? No. Exhibit 34 is received.
Now, this protocol, is that something that you can complete as soon as your autopsy is done?
No, I take notes during the autopsy. I dictate from those notes, and then until I have all the other information, like the laboratory finding and my conclusions, then I finalize it.
And is that what happened in this case, that you needed to wait to finalize this?
Yes.
Okay. In this case, did you specifically send any items to a lab for testing?
Yes.
When you send toxicology samples, do you always use the same lab?
No, I use one of two labs. In 2018, I don't know if I only used one or two labs. I primarily use a lab called NMS for most of my cases, but sometimes, at least now, I send some cases to the State Lab of Hygiene.
Okay. If you needed a more comprehensive report, which lab would you pick?
NMS
Okay. Where is that lab located?
in Pennsylvania.
In this case with Ms. Hernan, did you send samples to NMS labs?
I did.
Actually, multiple times?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to show the witness, please, Exhibit 35. And again, Dr. Bedrzewski, is there something on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I would just have Ms. DeValkenir please slowly scroll through the 14-page exhibit.
This was the final, the fourth actually, and the final report from NMS Labs on the specimens from Lynn Hernan's autopsy.
Is this something that you used in order to determine the cause of death in this case?
Yes.
In fact, is it often included right behind your protocol?
Yes, it's often, if people request my autopsy protocol, rather than copying everything that's on the report, I would just attach it to my report.
Okay. And is that what you did in this case?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate copy of the final report from NMS Labs in this case?
Yes.
I move Exhibit 35 into evidence.
Exhibit 35 is received.
Dr. Bedrzewski, do you know roughly the time frame that you received the toxicology initially in this case?
I think it was possibly November after I did the autopsy in September or in October.
Okay. When you received the toxicology, did you end up contacting NMS Labs?
Yes.
Why?
Because there was a substance that I was an unusual finding that I hadn't seen in a report from their facility before. It was called tetrahydrozoline.
Why did you contact the lab about that?
I wanted to know specifically if there was more testing that should be done. In other words, if you find a surprising finding, I mean, many of the findings in their toxicology report were things that I was familiar with and were found in her investigation in terms of the medication she had access to. But tetrahydrozoline just sort of came out of nowhere. So I called them and I said, you know, what's your experience with this? Should I send another specimen? Can we confirm it through another means? Because this is an unexpected result.
In terms of the autopsy itself in this case, were there remarkable findings that kind of pointed you in a certain direction about what the manner of death might be?
Because there were a number of medication bottles at the scene, there were scattered pills on the floor, there was powder kind of ground up on her body, there was a thought that maybe there was an ingestion was a possibility for the cause of death. She had also been recently released from the hospital, and she was on a lot of medication, so she clearly had some medical conditions. So perhaps natural disease was the cause of death. So I would say initially that was my thought.
Okay. Ultimately, Dr. Bedrzewski, if we could, Ms. DeValkenir could flip back to Exhibit 34, please. When did your protocol get finished in this matter?
Sometime after I determine the cause of death. So the death certificate would be signed first, then it's just the paperwork of including all your data and proofreading the report and signing it.
And Ms. DeValconier, if we could please show the witness exhibit 36. Dr. Budritsky, this is a single page exhibit. Do you see it on the screen before you?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a cause of death letter that we send because death records are not available in general to everybody. Only, next of kin typically, it's a vital record. But the information that I determine regarding cause of death might be necessary to release so that people know what the determination of cause of death is. So it's basically a short form saying that. So this is a letter I constructed, or the office constructed, based on what was on the death certificate of Lynn Hernan regarding the cause and manner of death and how the injury occurred.
What's the date on this exhibit?
September 27th, 2019.
And remind the jury when you did the autopsy?
October 4th, 2018.
So fair to say a lot of time passed between the autopsy and your determination in this case?
Yes.
Is that common?
This long, not common, but there were 4 different submissions for toxicology, and I wanted to be very sure, based on what my final determination was, that I had not failed to consider any further or new information.
And is exhibit 36 a fair and accurate copy of the letter your office produced in this case?
I can't see the exhibit number, but
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Just scroll down. Thank you.
Yes.
I move exhibit 36 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
36 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
There's a little bit of a delay, so I just want to make sure that it's in the jury box before we continue. All right, I think I even saw the light go on some of your faces, so that's a clue. Dr. Budritsky, is this exhibit 36 that you were just shown on your screen?
Yes.
If we could scroll down, please. Mr. Volkner. Okay. And we're going to go much more in depth into these determinations, but before the lunch break here, I'd just like you to explain to the jury the content in the middle paragraph of this and what your findings were in this case.
Okay. It's structured as a death certificate is structured. So what my obligation is to fill out the death certificate is to fill out what they call the primary cause of death, and that's like part 1. And part 2 are all the other conditions that contributed significantly to the cause of death. Then there's, if it's not a natural death, how did an injury occur, and the time and place, and how it occurred. So the cause of death I determined was tetrahydrozoline poisoning. I also determined that there were other significant conditions. I think it's important to say that the CDC has instructions on filling out a death certificate, and other significant conditions should not include things that are historical. It should include things that affect the cause of death in a significant way. So you should be able to say why you put that in there. So under that conditions, I included a number of other medications, including baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone, and cyclobenzaprine use, other medications. I also put in some of her important natural diseases, including interstitial myocarditis, hypertension, hepatic steatosis, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Then I have to determine a manner of death. I have to pick one of the 5 manners, and I determined it was a homicide, which is a medical determination, not based on law enforcement or criminal rules. It's a public health determination, actually. And how this injury occurred is that she was given tetrahydrozoline by another, which is why I called it a homicide. If it was self-administered, it would be something else. And the use of baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone, and cyclobenzaprine. So I have to indicate all of those unnatural conditions as injury.
Thank you, Dr. Budritsky. I think this would be a good time to take the lunch break, Judge.
Okay, switching over to the part 2 of the testimony for this medical examiner.
Have a break after the direct's done so I could be properly set up for the cross-exam.
Sure, I'll take that under advisement and we'll just see how long it takes for the remainder of her direct.
Fair.
All right, anything else from either of the parties? If not, we'll just get Dr.
I did want to mention that Dr. Kasinko will be watching live stream of the expert testimony, which
Come back up to the witness.
Madam Clerk, is the mic's on? Great, got it. Good afternoon, Dr. Budritsky. You acknowledge you're still under oath to tell the truth today?
I do.
Okay. Before we dive further into some of the medical records and toxicology, I want to ask you a few questions about something pretty specific, and I'm going to ask my helper, Ms. DeValcanier, to show you Exhibit 20, just the witness, please. And I want to ask if that's something you recognize. Acknowledging in this case, you've already told the jury that kind of your eyes and ears helpers gather info for you, right?
Yes.
Okay. So do you see Exhibit 20 before you?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something that you recognize having reviewed?
Yes.
Does it look like a fair and accurate copy of the photo you reviewed?
Yes.
I'd move 20 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
Objection. 20 is received if it had not been earlier, and permission to publish is granted.
We're just gonna wait till it gets up on the screens. Great. Dr. B, this is the Exhibit 20 that you just saw on the screen before you.
Yes.
And actually, this is already in evidence. But what is the jury looking at in Exhibit 20?
This is the hand of Lynn Hernan. It shows jewelry. It shows her long painted nails and a small injury on the back of her hand.
Okay. Is it important for the medical examiner's office to create a record of valuables that a decedent might be wearing?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because we could be accused of taking them.
Okay. Next, I'd like to just show the witness, Exhibit 46. And doctor, do you see Exhibit 46 before you?
Yes.
Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Did you take that?
No.
Who took it?
One of the pathology assistants during the course of the autopsy.
Okay. Have you seen that photo before?
Yes.
I'd move Exhibit 46 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
Objection. Exhibit 46 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
Dr. Budritsky, what is the jury looking at in Exhibit 46?
This is a photo of all the jewelry as well as the glasses that were removed from the body of Lynn Hernan at the time of autopsy.
In terms of the middle bracelet, does that appear to be the same one shown in Exhibit 20 of the photo of Ms. Hernan's hand?
It does.
Okay. Next, I'd like to please just show the witness Exhibits 38 and then 39. I'm just going to ask if you recognize these things, Doctor. Fair to say Exhibit 39 is actually 2 pages,
Yes.
and Exhibit 38 is just 1 page?
Yes.
Do you recognize those things?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 38, please?
38 is a certification by myself that the photographs on a CD are actually from the case of Lynn Hernan, that they're true copies.
Does this document also speak to the records that would have come from your office in this case?
Yes, I see that. It's the records and the photographs, yes.
Okay. As the administrator of your office, is part of your duty to respond to record requests and things like that?
It is. I'm named the record custodian.
Okay. So have you created certifications of records many, many times before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Fair to say this is the one for this case.
True.
What about Exhibit 39? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that part of the record for this case in your file?
Yes.
Okay. I'd move Exhibits 38 and 39 into evidence, ask for permission to publish, starting with 38.
No objection. Exhibits 38 and 39 are received, permission to publish granted.
And if we scroll to the bottom of this page, Doctor, can we see that number 38 exhibit sticker?
Yes.
Okay, and if we scroll back up, essentially this is you certifying the records you gave over in this case, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now I'd like to publish Exhibit 39, starting with page 1, and then scrolling to page 2, please. Doctor, you testified that this is a record in your file for this case.
Yes.
What kind of a record is this?
This is property or evidence receipt.
What does that mean?
That means that when there is a transfer of property from the decedent to another person, everything that was transferred is listed. And then on the bottom, it says who it's released by, who it's released to, and the date.
Do you know a Catherine Doherty?
Yes.
Who's that?
She's a deputy medical examiner in my office.
Okay. In terms of the items listed on the left, would you agree it appears to be jewelry items?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the top, again, the decedent's name is shown, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have in terms of those exhibits. Now, Dr. Budritsky, I'd like to ask you about the different pieces of the puzzle, so to say, that you reviewed before concluding the cause of death in this case, to be tetrahydrozoline poisoning and the manner being homicide, okay? First, I'd like to start with a discussion of Ms. Hernan's medical records. Did you have access to historical medical records for Ms. Hernan?
Yes.
Where did you get those from?
We received records from 3 providers, from Advanced Pain Management, from Aurora, and from Pro Healthcare.
Did you ask for those?
Yes.
Why?
It's important to know in any case, I mean, these were asked for before any lab tests came back, so I would understand her general health and historical information about her health.
Were the records voluminous?
Well, not as many as some, but they were a lot of pages.
Okay. Did you actually create kind of a summary of those records that was helpful to you in your analysis of this case?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to show just the witness, please. The multi-page exhibit in 210.
210?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Doctor, is that actually a 13-page exhibit?
Yes.
Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a summary in order of time, not by provider, of the healthcare contacts that Lynn Hernan had. So I took the records and I went chronologically from the earliest record to the latest record, indicating which healthcare provider she saw, what was the main reason, what were some of the features of the history and physical, and findings in plan.
Is that a fair and accurate copy of the summary you made in this case?
Yes.
I'd move Exhibit 210 into evidence, ask for permission to publish.
No objection.
Thank you. Exhibit 210 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
And Ms. DeVulcanier, if we could please start with page 1 of Exhibit 210. Dr. Budritsky, did you actually put the exhibit you created on some corkboard in this case?
I did.
Why did you do that?
Because it's important, I thought, to show the sequence of events in its totality, isolating page by page. It gave me a problem seeing patterns and sequence and what was repetitious and, you know, how things happen. So I thought it would be better to put it in a as much of a longitudinal form as I could and still be readable.
Are these two corkboards the exhibits that you just described putting together?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to put the first part of Exhibit 210 on the easel.
Could I please see it?
It's Exhibit 210.
Oh, it's the same thing that's on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And as we go through this, Doctor, I'm also going to have Ms. DeVulcanier blow it up for the jury page by page, but I think it is helpful to have it in chronological order as you put it together. So as the jury is looking at the screen in front of them, page 1 of Exhibit 210, could you identify where that is on the corkboard I just put up?
Yes. I can get up?
Yes.
Okay. We're starting here, going down, and then coming back here.
Okay.
And can you just make a record of what side of the board she referenced when she said starting here?
So page 1 would then be at the top left corner of the corkboard?
Yes, as you're looking at it.
And as we continue to discuss these records, you indicated that we're going to be moving down from that page?
Correct.
And then down the right side of the exhibit?
Correct.
Okay, and there's actually a third piece of corkboard to finish the exhibit?
Yes.
Okay,
Attorney Nicolai, are there 2 columns on that corkboard?
yes.
All right, thank you. So that'll help clarify for the record what that is referencing. Thank you.
So, could you please explain to the jury what each column is and why it's important?
Yes. So the first column is the provider, and I think there might be a key at the bottom, but PHC stands for Pro Healthcare, A stands for Aurora, and APM is Advanced Pain Management. So those are the 3 provider records. Should I continue or?
Please stay on page 1.
Okay.
And then the next column?
The next column is the date of service that she went to see the healthcare provider.
And the next?
The next is the reason that was indicated at the first part of the record. So, you know, if the medical assistant indicated why the patient was there, you know, that's what I put there.
And then in the middle column, what does the jury see here?
When the healthcare provider, as you know, when you go to the doctor, they say, have you ever had headaches? Have you ever had an earache? Do you have a sore throat? Do you have chest pain? It's called a review of symptoms. So when the doctors were doing a review of symptoms, or when they asked the patient for their input of what their complaint was, that's the kind of information I put there.
Okay. And what about the next column, exam by healthcare provider?
The next area is when the healthcare provider was doing the physical exam, you know, listening to the heart, listening to the lungs, palpating the abdomen, or observing the mood or affect of the patient, and that was in the exam part of the record. that's where I put that information.
And could you just say again how that differs from the column before it?
Well, when a physician is talking to you in the office, and there can be some overlap, but they're supposed to start out, and they generally start out like, why are you here, and how are you feeling? And I'm going to ask you about everything, even though you came in for a stomach ache. I'm going to ask you about a headache, and I'm going to ask you about chest pain, just to make sure that I have the full picture. And then the next part is they move into the exam, and they start listening to you, and doing your reflexes and palpating your neck and all those kind of things. That's more physical exam. Of course, they're still talking to you, so they might get more additional feedback, but it's primarily the history at the front end, then the examination.
Thank you. Doctor, and what have you noted in the final column?
What I would consider the findings or plan. And again, it's not 100% isolated, because the doctor, after the physical exam part, might say assessment, might say plan, might say recommendations, might say adding a medicine, taking away a medicine. So those are the kind of things that I put in that column.
Okay. The date in the first row is December 29th of 14, is that right?
Yes.
Does that mean that's the first time Ms. Hernan ever went to the doctor?
No.
Okay, what does that mean?
That means that's the earliest record in the pro health care records that I received.
Okay. When you compiled Exhibit 210, did you put it in chronological order regardless of provider?
Yes.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then that is the first record in time that you had?
That's correct.
Okay. In terms of page 1, the first Aurora entry from 2017, it says ROS negative. What does that mean?
That means that the doctor might have used that exact terms, and I tried to be as close to what the record said itself. So ROS stands for review of symptoms, and the shorthand for a doctor after asking you a lot of questions might be review of symptoms negative. In other words, there were no complaints that they had. And if they indicated that they covered in their questions the cardiovascular system, which is CV, the gastrointestinal system, the neurologic system, and the psychiatric system, then that's what was covered and deemed to be negative.
Okay. In terms of the symptoms and issues being addressed just on this page 1, is there a common theme or issue that it appears Ms. Hernan was having?
I don't even think I have all of page 1 on my screen.
Oh.
Okay, that's all of page 1. Okay. Well, of these 5 encounters, let's see, 2 had to do with her GI system.
In terms of the column to the farthest right, some of those boxes have medication names in it, is that right?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, it was any change in her standard medications. I didn't write down when she was seen, she said, these are my standard medications, and I didn't repeat that. But when there was a change or a comment that the doctor, because of a decision point they had in their head, that's when I indicated it. So Lynn Hernan, for example, on the 3rd entry, was on alprazolam, and the decision of this doctor was to continue the alprazolam but discontinue the hydrocodone. So she specifically indicated that I'm going to continue on this drug, but discontinue that drug, leaving other things in place, and also start desipramine.
What is that?
It's can be used for pain, or it can be used as antidepressant. It's a tricyclic.
So as the jury looks at page 1, is it fair to say those are not all of the prescription medications that were prescribed to this patient?
That's true.
Okay. Anything else on page 1 that is significant to you that you want to share with the jury?
Well, what I was really paying a lot of attention to in reviewing her records were her GI symptoms, because as you go through time, her GI symptoms were a recurring theme, if you will. So I paid attention when she had them and when she didn't have them to see how consistent they were. So, for example, at the bottom entry here, I said negative nausea and vomiting because that was a condition she had before, but it was not provided in the history to Dr. Kine. I also paid attention to the number of times she was started and discontinued on medications, because another pattern I saw was that in terms of trying to achieve pain control for her back pain, she had chronic back pain, there was a lot of trial and error with medications. She tried a lot of things that didn't work, and she was taken off them. And I thought it was interesting because a lot of patients, they are tried a drug, and it's not just discontinued, it's merely added to. So you end up with a patient that might have 5 things to address pain, but none of them are removed. But here it seemed that every time they tried a new one, the old one was discontinued.
Thank you. Moving to page 2 of Exhibit 210. Could you please indicate to the jury, Doctor, what month and year we're looking at here?
We're looking at June of 2017 and July of 2017.
It looks like throughout these records, you're also noting a weight in some of them.
Yes.
Is that Ms. Hernan's weight at the time of the visit?
Yes, I began noting that because a lot of the historical information would be about large amounts of weight being gained or lost. So I thought I really wanted to keep track of what the actual numbers were.
In terms of the material that you've included on this page, it looks like there was some assessment regarding depression on the second row. Is that true?
Yes.
And what did you note about that?
That specifically in the psychiatric questioning, the doctor indicated there was no evidence of depression, but there was evidence of anxiety, insomnia, and fatigue, as well as alcohol use.
Okay. If during your review of all of these medical records, could we please have that on the screen?
It just went up.
Oh, sorry. If during your review of these medical records and during your creation of Exhibit 210, if any record would have noted the term suicidal ideation, would you have noted that?
Yes, I was certainly looking specifically for indications of suicidality, since that was in the differential for manner of death.
What does the term suicidal ideation mean?
It means that a patient says that I have thought about killing myself, and it could be just that statement, or it could be I thought about killing myself by jumping off a bridge, getting more specific.
In terms of the first 2 pages that the jury has already looked at, did you note that in either of those pages?
No, because it didn't exist in the record.
We're back up. If we can please go to page 3.
Can I say something else about page 2?
I didn't ask you,
Yeah, that's okay. So this is the bottom row is the first time she saw advanced pain management, and they did a functional assessment of how impaired she was because of her back pain. And that's the Owestry score. So, 0 is good and 50 is bad. So on this Owestry score questionnaire that they provided, they said that she has moderate functional impairment. And I bring that to your attention because later they're going to do another Owestry score, and it's going to be different. So there's a test like at the onset and a test at the end.
Excuse me, Your Honor, may I know what page we're referring to now? I don't see that.
Page 2?
Yes. And it's the
First box, or first column, it says APM, date of visit 7/10/17.
That's one you gave me.
Yeah, we'd like to sidebar.
If it's going to involve that computer, I need to see it. So I'm going to have to excuse the jury.
Yeah. It's not gonna involve my computer.
I want to look at it.
Okay.
All right. We'll excuse the jury, please.
Exhibits, it's just bigger font.
You like this.
Rows. Thank you. Columns is the same. I meant rows. The horizontal. Sorry about that.
Sure.
That's the
Paper copiation so we can continue.
All right, let's see if they continue this testimony.
I haven't been able to take that one over to have it.
And if we could please clear the screen and move to page 3. Dr. Bedritsky, are we now moving forward in time?
Yes.
Okay. What are the months and year associated with this page?
These are visits from August and September of 2017.
And remind the jury when the autopsy was conducted?
In October of 2018.
Okay. In terms of the information that you collected on this page, what was the significance of it, please, if you can explain it to the jury?
Well, she saw, direct the attention to who the specific healthcare provider was in the different places. But the provider, Sarah McGrath, said that she still had back pain and she had was having muscle spasms and they had an MRI which showed that she had some arthritis at L3-4. They also said, let's start tizanidine. The Owestry score is slightly better. It's 31 instead of 50. As a result of this pain, she then received a facet injection in her lumbar spine, and a sacroiliac injection was scheduled. And if you skip down to the bottom 1 APM, it says then she received the SI injection and there was slight pain improvement. I noticed as I'm looking at this that the A here should be APM. Dr. Young is working with the advanced pain management, and I have it correct on the sacroiliac joint injection, but that provider should be APM because those were all handled by advanced pain management for her back pain.
Okay. In terms of Dr. Sama, she's with Aurora, is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
So she has regular follow-ups with this physician every 30 days because she's getting refills of her medication, and it says here, follow-up for anxiety and medication refill. So she sees her on a very regular basis. And now Lynn is complaining of GI problems, but has not followed up with a GI specialist.
Thank you, doctor. Moving to page 4 of this exhibit. What months and years are we looking at?
Now we're still in September and October of 2017.
And these entries are the decedent seeing a different doctor at the same pain management location?
Well, her regular healthcare provider at pain management is a advanced practitioner, nurse practitioner, advanced practice nurse practitioner McGrath. She sees her on the regular monthly basis. When she needs a procedure, the injection, she sees Dr. Young.
Okay.
So she's been seeing, I think all the other records are associated with the nurse practitioner McGrath.
Is it fair to say that it appears Ms. Hernan was still reporting issues with pain?
Yes, she's still having back pain. The pain is worse with driving. She did get some relief temporarily from the injections. They are trying 2 new pain medications, tizanidine and Butrans, and she was assessed for opioid abuse risk potential using opioid risk tool.
Are you familiar with that tool?
No, I don't use it. I mean, I know there are different assessment tools, like the Owestry is an assessment tool. There's an assessment tool for alcoholism. There's one for opiate. They're clinical tools used in clinical practice.
And ultimately on that ORT score, what did that visit reveal?
The opioid risk assessment revealed a low risk for opioid use problems.
In terms of all the records that we've gone through, again, I'm going to ask you, did you see any record of suicidal ideation, severe depression?
No, and I indicated that there were pertinent negatives, like she was asked about depression and anxiety, and they were negative on both these visits.
And you said it appeared she was consistently going to the doctor at least once a month.
Yes, in this period of time, yes.
Okay. Going to page 5, please. And we made this one a little bit smaller, Doctor. Are all the rows now visible on page 5?
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like we're still in the year 2017, late fall, early winter. Is that true?
Yes, November and December of 2017.
Okay. Now, it looks like there's a history provided at the top of mouth burns. Do you see that?
Yes.
Why did you note that?
It seemed to be possibly medication related. So she had a new symptom. She also says that due to the pain in her mouth, she's reducing her intake to soup.
Okay.
And that led to some weight loss. And you can see that her weight's 192 on that visit.
Okay. It looks like there was depression reported at this visit. Is that true?
Well, it's interesting because in the review of symptoms, it was not indicated, but when the doctor examined her, the doctor did indicate it. So when she said, "Are you depressed?" apparently the patient said no, but after doing the exam and the doctor indicated that she was depressed and offered a referral to a therapist, and she refused.
It looks like there's a a medication change in that visit as well. Could you explain that to the jury?
Yes. Dr. Same decided that there was a risk of prescribing a benzodiazepine, which alprazolam is, as well as hydrocodone. So she was prescribing both those drugs to Lynn, and she said, "You have to really decide because I don't want to give them both to you anymore." And Lynn said, "I'm going to give up the hydrocodone, the pain pill, the opioid, and I want to stay on the alprazolam because that helps me."
Did the records indicate to you how it was helpful?
She used it for sleep. She took it every night for sleep.
Okay. In terms of moving down this page, it looks like there was a tinnitus complaint. Is that true?
Yes, she had ringing in her ears.
And then that it actually looks like there's 2 visits for that. Is that correct?
Well, she saw the physician who ordered the audiogram, and then the next visit was the audiogram done by the audiologist.
Okay. And then finally on the bottom, in early December of 2017, there's another pain-related visit. Is that true?
Right. It's her visit to advanced pain management for management of her back pain.
In terms of your testimony from the top of this page that Ms. Hernan reported eating soup because of mouth sores, through your review of these subsequent records, did that remain a consistent problem, or do you know?
It seemed to go away or get better.
In terms of how you characterized a common theme being a GI trouble.
Yes.
In terms of page 5, is there anything to reflect that during this time period?
Not specifically GI complaints. I mean, clearly the mouth is part of the GI system. She had that problem, but there's no complaints of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, or abdominal pain. Oh, I'm sorry. There's no complaints of diarrhea, heartburn, or incontinence. There is abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting. So it's some yes, some no.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It looks like right where you put that arrow, there's also a report of dry eyes. Was that something that you noticed throughout these records?
She did not complain of it consistently, but she was consistently using lubricant eye drops.
Okay. Going to page 6, please. If we could please clear the screen. And here we're in December of 17 and January of 18, is that true? In February of 18?
Correct.
Okay. It looks like there's more information about vision there at the top. What is that record?
She went for an eye exam in which they assessed her general eye health, and she was found to have cataracts. She did not want new glasses. The doctor did explain some remedy for her dry eyes, including using artificial tears, Walgreens brand, which is what she did. He also recommended some other things like, using warm compresses and so forth. So it was like more of a comprehensive exam for all visual problems. So she did decline Restasis, which is a specific medication for dry eyes, and says, I'm just going to continue using my artificial tears.
Okay. Could you circle that Restasis term on this page, please? And what is that?
It's a prescription medication for dry eyes.
Okay. So at this visit, she was offered that, you said, and she declined it?
Right.
Okay. If we could please clear that. Going down, it appears there's another couple pain entries, true?
One for back pain at Advanced Pain Management, and the other, she went to urgent care for abdominal pain.
Okay. Is that kind of the GI symptom again?
Yes, she had nausea, gas, abdominal pain, and she also complained of welts on her legs, which I don't recall that was specifically addressed by this visit. That recommended GI remedies such as a clear liquid diet, Maalox, avoid caffeine and alcohol. And she was given a diagnosis of gastritis.
What is that?
Inflammation of the stomach, irritation of the stomach.
In terms of the records that we've gone through so far, it doesn't appear that Ms. Hernan was being treated for a serious disease. Would you agree with that?
Not a life-threatening disease, but I don't want to mischaracterize chronic pain in her back and chronic GI complaints as not serious, because they can be very serious to a function of a person, but she was not diagnosed with a life-threatening disease in terms of cancer or serious heart disease, something of that nature.
Okay. Did it appear that there were any major systems of the body shutting down over time?
No.
Okay. Anything else on page 6 that you'd like to point out for the jury, doctor?
Well, she did gain weight. She's from the previous under 200-pound weight. She's 225 pounds. She actually stopped the cyclobenzaprine that she was prescribed, another trial for pain, because of the weight gain, and was to start something called metoxalone.
Okay. Moving to page 7. Fair to say all these entries are February of 2018?
That's true.
Okay. It looks like there's a new pain issue on here. Is that true?
Well, it's she saw Dr. Keim earlier in looking at these records for a foot injection, so this is her second visit to a podiatrist because she had plantar fasciitis.
Okay. The weights are also continually listed on this page. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in some of the records, did you find that there were some specific reports regarding what Ms. Hernan was consuming, eating?
Yes.
Did you include some of that on this page?
Yes, because at one point she said, I can only eat soup. So, and then if she tells the doctor, she said, I have abdominal pain. She said, I've eaten bologna for 4 nights in a row. Maybe that has something to do with my abdominal pain. This is her own statement about linking her symptoms to her diet.
In terms of the History reported on page 7, any indication of severe depression, suicidal ideation?
No, actually, Dr. Sama on 2/7 said that she was cheerful.
At the very bottom on the right, it says start baclofen times 2 weeks. Why did you put that in there?
Well, it's again showing that we tried cyclobenzaprine, we took it off. We tried desipramine, we took it off. We tried Butrans, we took it off. Now we're tried metaxalone. Insurance didn't cover, so we're taking that away. So now we're trying baclofen. So as I said from the beginning, there were multiple trials to manage her pain, trying different medications.
Okay. Moving to page 8. It looks like this time frame is between March and July of 2018. Is that correct?
Yes.
In terms of these records, Doctor, could you explain to the jury some of the significant points that you've added for them to see today?
Well, she changed her primary care doctor from Dr. Sama to Dr. Abdulal because Dr. Sama says that your urine drug screen was positive for something I didn't prescribe you. So I'm discharging you from my service. And so now she's seeing a new doctor. So on 3/7/18, her reason to go to the doctor was to establish care with this doctor. He didn't change any of her treatment. He does note she has a history of depression, but not that she has depression at this visit.
Okay. In terms of that urine screen,
Yes.
what can you tell, what significance does that have to you in your determination?
There's very little information other than what I put in there. So when people are on in advanced pain management clinics, typically they do urine screens because they don't want to be issuing medications and not knowing what the patient may be taking besides that, because that could be dangerous. So on this urine screen, they found, I believe it was temazepam, which is a different benzodiazepine than she was prescribed, which was alprazolam. And that's really all I know. I mean, I don't know the nature of the screen. I don't know if it was confirmed. I don't know if they asked her what this means or did she take something. It just says you have a screen that's not consistent with what I'm giving you.
Okay. If you were going to rely on a screen like that, would you have it confirmed?
In my practice, I have to. I mean, I don't issue any conclusions based on a toxicology presumptive positive.
Okay. It looks like at the end of this page, there's a visit with Dr. Chan.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. It's not a visit with Dr. Chan. When she was admitted to the hospital, Dr. Chan admitted her, and he was able to see in his records that she went to a provider, or she told him she went to a provider on 7/8/18 for cough and pleuritic chest pain. So I don't have a record of that visit.
Down to speculation as to what she told him.
Sustained.
So I'm going to back up a second and make sure that I'm understanding. So in the history by healthcare provider for the last row, what does that say?
It says that Dr. Chan recorded a visit for cough and pleuritic chest pain on that date.
Okay. On what date?
He recorded it. He recorded that there was a visit on 7/8/18.
Okay. But you didn't get to look at any record from July 8th of 18.
Object to leading.
Did you get to look at a record from July 8th of 18?
I did not have a record from 7/8/18.
Okay. So why did you include this in your summary?
The importance of this is that she was put on a Z-Pak for bronchitis, and antibiotic administration is a risk factor for the eventual Clostridia difficile infection that she had. So the question and what Dr. Chan was looking for was, if you have...
Speculation as to what Dr. Chen was looking for.
Lay a little bit more foundation. Obviously, she's a medical examiner and a medical doctor, and I believe she may be able to render an opinion.
So let's back up a little bit. Did you look at a record that Dr. Chan wrote on September 15th of 2018?
I did.
And you just told the jury that in that record, this July event is noted. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay. Did you review the entire hospitalization records for that hospitalization for Ms. Hernan that began on 9/15 of 18?
All the records that I was provided, I reviewed.
Okay. When you review records, do they include comments from different providers and hospital personnel that see a patient?
Yes.
Does it often include themes throughout the records about issues that are occurring or ways to solve issues?
Yes.
Diagnostically, in your opinion, did it appear significant to Dr. Chan that there was an antibiotic recently involved?
Yes.
Is that significant to you if someone's having abdominal issues at this age?
Yes.
Why?
Because antibiotics of any kind can cause GI issues. We probably all know that. And in the elderly, especially, and with certain strong antibiotics, it basically clears your normal flora. And then a pathogen such as C. difficile takes hold and can cause really bad symptoms.
Is C. difficile a bacteria?
It is a bacteria.
Okay. If a doctor was trying to help a patient with those GI issues, would they want to know about antibiotic use?
Yes.
And did it appear that Dr. Chan wanted to know about that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to page 9, please. There's just 2 rows on this page, doctor, and they both appear to be July of 2018. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. What is the first visit with Dr. Abdallah for?
For nausea, vomiting, and upper abdominal pain. That was an emergency room visit.
Okay. In terms of, it looks like there's additional pain or discomfort information in a different location of Ms. Hernan. Is that true?
Well, she is complaining of weak legs associated, well, she's complaining of weak legs at the same time she's complaining of flu-like symptoms for 2 weeks, including vomiting.
Did those records indicate whether Ms. Hernan got any fluids when she was at the ER that day?
Yes, they determined that she needed fluid reconstitution by giving IVs.
If someone went to the doctor severely dehydrated, would that person be given fluids?
Yes.
Okay. The line above the IV fluid entry on the top row.
Yes.
Is there actually an error in that line?
Yes.
What is it?
It's she was given, this was a longer term, I'm going to write it. She was given inulin, not insulin. There's no S. Inulin is something you give for constipation because if you take it, it draws water into your bowel. It's like Miralax or something that it will help you go to the bathroom. So she was on inulin and she was on lubiprostone, which is also given for constipation. And I kind of just took note of that because of the later diarrhea problems and the fact that she was a little dehydrated. But it's inulin, not insulin.
Okay. There's some weights noted on this page, true?
Yes.
And what are those?
226.
Okay. Do you know when the ER visit ended?
She was discharged the same day.
Oh, okay. And then on July 30th of 2018, it looks like she saw the same doctor again?
No, different. It's right. A. Abdullah for the ER, and for Aurora, it's A. Abdullah, her new primary care.
Would that primary care visit be consistent with those monthly visits you talked about earlier?
I believe so. I don't remember when the last time she saw him was.
Okay. In terms of what information this doctor got during the exam with Ms. Hernan on July 30th of 18, what did you include there?
Well, that she's still having ringing in her ears or tinnitus, constipation, hip and back pain. She has no complaints of anxiety or depression. And I noted that it was in the record that she was taking diphenhydramine, and it was in the record that she was allergic to diphenhydramine. So I really wasn't sure what to make of that.
Okay. What about the next column?
The doctor says that really you look like a well female. He didn't make a diagnosis of any pathology. And he also performed a depression screening tool, which is called the PHQ-9, which was 0. And in that scale, that goes from 0 to 27. Anything less than 5 is an absence of a depressive disorder.
Okay. Going to page 10, please. Now, at this stage, what medical attention was Ms. Hernan receiving?
Well,
on September 15th of 2018, was there a significant event for Ms. Hernan in terms of her medical history?
Yes.
On our screen went dark.
Yep, I know. Everyone's dead. Check your cables. I know you probably didn't move anything, but I know I have the ability to refresh F5. Maybe if you do that, that helps. When all else fails. I won't make you reboot yet.
At the hospital, she stayed for 13 days. She had very bad watery diarrhea. She was weak. She had abdominal pain, and she was in the hospital for a long time.
Were you able to review all the medical records for that visit?
Oh, the records that I reviewed them all, yes.
Okay. And which hospital did Ms. Hernan go to?
Pro Health.
Okay. Could you please describe to the jury, give them an overview of the issue and how it was addressed during her hospital stay?
She was quite sick when she came in. They initially even gave her a diagnosis of acute renal failure, but that was reversed with hydration. So they called it pre-renal failure, which means that you're so dry that your chemistries aren't normal, and when you rehydrate, things get better. She was weak. She had watery diarrhea. She didn't have diarrhea initially for a while because they wanted a stool specimen to do some tests on, and the nurses reported that it was too hard to capture when she did have a diarrhea. It's like her gut was empty, and then when she did pass stool, it was so watery it got soaked into the pad, so they couldn't collect it. So it took a long time for them to get the test to determine it was C. difficile. She saw multiple specialists while she was in the hospital. She saw an infectious disease specialist. She saw a GI specialist. She saw, let's see, I could look on the board. There were multiple consults that were obtained while she was in the hospital trying to figure out, renal specialists, what her problems were and how to fix them. They recommended a colonoscopy, which became a point of disagreement with her because she had this colonoscopy at the beginning of the medical record journey that we took in 2015. And the results of that colonoscopy was that it was a poor prep and she had to be disimpacted. So I imagine it was a very unpleasant experience. So she refused a colonoscopy because that would be a recommended test to find out if you had a problem because you had constant diarrhea. So she was very upset about them wanting to do one, and she kept refusing. That refusal led to a lot of distress on her part. She became very teary, and as a response to that, the medical team asked for a palliative care consult. And the palliative care consult, the reason for the consult was that she was very teary and upset about the colonoscopy. And they evaluated her and said she has no life, I want to get the right words if I can, I put it on the screen.
Page 11, I think we've made it that far. And doctor, before we keep going, is it true that your cork board exhibit actually continues on another piece?
Yes.
And does this piece actually include all of the hospitalization
Yes.
records? Okay,
Yes.
so I'm just going to put that.
That board is all the doctors she saw while she was an inpatient in the hospital. So the palliative care nurse practitioner said that Lynn Hernan suffered more of GI issues without other life-limiting illnesses, and we're signing off on seeing her. Let's see the other consults.
Before you continue, I have a few follow-ups on, it's pronounced palliative care?
Palliative care.
What is that?
Well, when people have illnesses that don't seem to be like an immediate cure, I suppose. I mean, I'm not a clinician, so my understanding, I don't give palliative care consults.
Speculation.
Okay,
Overruled. She may answer.
all right.
Go ahead, doctor.
It's to help a patient understand coping with how to deal with a long-term illness that might not have, like, here's a pill and it'll be gone kind of answers. That's my understanding.
And in this case, was that team involved throughout the hospitalization?
No, actually, I recall that this particular practitioner said that she spent 30 minutes with the patient and signed off.
What does that mean?
It means that she's not going to follow up with her any further.
So if the jury heard information that the palliative care team was brought in because Ms. Hernan was dying, would you agree with that statement?
No.
How would you characterize the palliative care records you reviewed?
Well, I tried to quote it in my little handout because I thought it was very interesting that the practitioner said, I'm here because I was told that I'm supposed to help her with symptoms because she's crying and doesn't want to have a colonoscopy. It struck me that perhaps, well, that's what she said. I won't speculate on what I thought about it, I guess. But that's what the practitioner put in the record, and that's why it's in quotes. And after talking to Lynn, who she said kept talking about the colonoscopy and how frustrated she was about it, and she doesn't want it. So the palliative care consult was kind of a discussion about colonoscopy. The nurse practitioner said, this is a GI issue, not a life-threatening, a life-limiting illness. That's her words. We will sign off.
And this is your copy. Dr. Bedrinsky, I'd like to, if we could put the publish down, show just you Exhibit 213 that's been marked by the state. It's a multi-page exhibit, and then we'll come back to the medical records. Is the screen on before you, Doctor?
Yes.
Okay, please, Ms. DeValcanier, if you could please scroll through. Dr. Bedrinsky, do you see on this multi-page exhibit that in the bottom center of each page, there's actually a page number 1 through 6?
Oh, yes.
Have you seen Exhibit 213 before?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, these are some of the medical records from Lynn Hernan's hospitalization.
Okay. Are they specifically relevant to what you've just testified about?
There's a record that's more complete than what I see here.
Okay. Does it appear that the exhibit that you've been shown is missing any pages?
No, this is a different part of the record. So there's a part of the record that is the consult by palliative care. This record are the nurse's notes about what happened. So on this page, this is page 2, a nurse, Mary Neubauer, says that Ann Thompson from palliative care, social worker, met with the patient, and it talks about their interaction. But besides this note by the nurse, there's another note by the palliative care therapist.
in a different portion of the records? What do you recall about that note?
That's the note that said, Ann Thompson said, where I took the quote, that there is not a life-limiting illness.
Okay. If we could please go back to page 11 of Exhibit 210.
Do you have a copy of 213 for me, please?
I don't believe it's in the box.
No, it's not, Judge. This came up. I don't have a paper copy. I'm not offering that as an exhibit either at this point. If we could please publish the screen, Madam Clerk. Doctor, could you please circle the row that references the palliative care team information? Thank you. You mentioned the term C. diff or C. difficile. What is that?
C stands for Clostridium. Clostridium difficile is an anaerobic bacteria that causes injury to your colon, a colitis, and diarrhea.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if we could please clear the screen, and then Ms. DeValcanier, if we can please go to page 12. Dr. Bedritsky, is this information that is also regarding the hospital stay?
Yes.
Okay. And at the top, there's the word infectious disease. What was that row regarding?
So Dr. Taft was the infectious disease consultant. So she had a doctor following her, a general doctor in the hospital, and then multiple consultants were offering their opinions as to how to help Ms. Hernan. So this infectious disease doctor did an exam, and his history included the things that I have in that column, that her friend says she's an alcoholic but no recent alcohol use. She has infrequent but liquid stools. She's been eating soup for 4 years. 4 years of GI symptoms. She's had a UTI 6 times. And 6 weeks ago took a sulfa antibiotic for a UTI. His exam showed a hydrated, fatigued patient with a distended abdomen and a tender right side. He refers to the CT scan of the abdomen that demonstrated proctocolitis. The patient refused colonoscopy, and even though they didn't have a culture yet at this time on 222 or a stool sample, he recommended that she be treated as if she had Clostridium difficile infection because he thought that was the most likely diagnosis. And that particular antibiotic is different from the antibiotic she was on that they were treating her for presumed other infections. So that was his recommendation.
What is proctocolitis?
Inflammation of your distal colon.
Okay. What is the antibiotic used for C. difficile?
Vancomycin.
Did that begin to be administered to Ms. Hernan in the hospital?
Yes.
After that, did it appear that her symptoms lessened?
Yes.
Okay. The information in the history column for the first entry, it says friend says and then continues on.
Yes.
Did the records indicate who that person was?
I don't recall.
Okay. Did in any of the medical records for the hospitalization in September of 2018 include information about people that were there with her in the hospital?
I do recall that there was a mention of Jessy Kurczewski, but I don't recall at what part of the hospitalization.
Okay. Moving down to the final row on this page, what is this entry in regards to?
The social worker E. White was part of the behavioral health team, and she came to see if the patient wanted a psychiatric evaluation or consult. And her response to this therapist was that she does not think anxiety or depression is affecting her, and she wanted to go home now that she had a diagnosis. And the conclusion in the findings and plan was she does not want to see a psychiatrist or take any psychiatric medication.
And did Ms. Hernan go home ultimately?
Yes, 9/28.
Okay. Moving to page 13, please. Is this the last entry in the hospitalization records?
Yes, this reflects the discharge summary by Dr. Liu, who discharged her, provided the discharge medication, and his findings are listed that, in his opinion, the hospitalization resulted in the identification of the main problem being proctocolitis, with a positive stool study for Clostridium difficile. 14 days of vancomycin were prescribed. Because she had the dehydration, he recommended discontinuing her diazide. Her drug was diazide, which is a combination of triamterene and hydrochlorothiazide, which are diuretics, or what is commonly known as water pills. So she was on a water pill for her high blood pressure, and he said, you had all these days of diarrhea. We should give you a water pill because that's really going to make things worse. So for your high blood pressure, we're going to start nifedipine, also known as Procardia. So he switched her high blood pressure medication upon discharge. And he said, we should follow up with you on October 4th of 2018.
Prior to the discharge, was there anything in the records suggesting that a facility would be more appropriate for Ms. Hernan upon release?
It was discussed because I hate to say she's elderly because she's younger than I am, but when older people are bedridden for as long as she was, which is about 2 weeks, you can become very deconditioned. So she came in weak, and she came in dehydrated, and she was in bed for 2 weeks, and they recommended that she go for rehabilitation for strengthening because they felt that she might not be able to cope at home. And the recommendation was either you need to go to a rehab facility so someone can help you, or you need to have somebody 24 hours at your home to help you. And she said, I'd rather go home and have somebody help me there.
Was there any discussion or diagnoses in the medical records you reviewed that Ms. Hernan had any kind of a terminal illness?
No.
Was there any record that suggested Ms. Hernan needed to be moved to or think about hospice care?
No.
In terms of being 2 weeks in bed, when you testified to that, what location was Ms. Hernan in bed for 2 weeks?
In the hospital.
Okay. Again, this is the last page of Exhibit 210, is that right? Is that true, Doctor?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So in terms of Exhibit 210 and the way that you've summarized your review of records in this case, at any point did you see concerns by any provider that Ms. Hernan had suicidal ideations?
No.
Severe depression?
No.
Terminal illness?
No.
I did miss one thing I wanted to point out. If we could go back to...
Are you done with 210?
No. If we could please go back to page... eight. of Exhibit 210. Dr. Bedrisky, I'd like you to note the weight at the May 2nd, 2018 visit, please.
238 pounds.
So if the jury has seen photos of a driver's license obtained in June of 2018 and the weight reported was 150, is that consistent with the medical records in this case?
No.
In fact, it's quite different, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you reviewed all the medical records in this case, going back the amount of years that you had them, were there indications that Ms. Hernan couldn't walk or move on her own ever?
Not at all.
Okay. During your review of the medical records, did you, I'm finished with 210, thank you.
May I say something?
Oh, go
That
ahead.
might answer the question you just asked me, because right on here, I said the OSTRI score was important. The OSTRI score is now 4, from 35 to 4. That's really a big improvement. So it basically says she has no functional impairment on 3/14/18.
And the higher OSTRI score was earlier in time, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. In terms of your review of the medical records in this case, did you see occasions where Ms. Hernan would complain about medication difficulty or symptoms from medication she didn't like?
Well, she discontinued a lot of the medications for various reasons. Right on the last thing we looked at, it says she discontinued baclofen for a rash. She discontinued Butrans after 6 days because it didn't work. She discontinued cyclobenzaprine because of weight gain. So, she discontinued medications for various reasons. But
Did the records that you reviewed indicate that Ms. Hernan was sharing these problems with doctors causing the discontinuation of meds?
yes,
Okay. In all of your review of all these medical records, did you ever see a record of Ms. Hernan telling any medical provider that she couldn't swallow pills?
no,
What about telling a medical provider that she had to crush pills in order to take them?
no, there's no record of it.
In terms of the times that you've noted and reviewed that medications were discontinued, was there ever an occasion you reviewed that there was a life-threatening reason that a medication was stopped?
There was not an occasion where she experienced a life-threatening reaction, but I won't say that continuing a medication she had some reaction to couldn't become more serious.
Okay. Specifically, let's talk about baclofen. What is that drug for?
It's for muscle spasms.
Okay. At one point, that was discontinued.
Yes.
Do you know why?
She said she had a rash on her abdomen.
Okay. Any other side effects that she didn't like that you recall?
Not that I recall.
Okay. At some point, we looked at the record when there were side effects or a complaint of mouth sores. Is that true?
Yes.
And that coincided with that report of eating soup?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Dr. Bedrisky, I'd like to turn to a new topic with you.
While you are going to move on to a new topic, I think this would be a very good time to take an afternoon break. So 15 to 20 minutes or so, you all can walk around. I don't think it's raining. You might even get to go outside back here. So all rise for the jury, please.
Alrighty, we are going to stop here for today with this testimony. Tomorrow we're going to look at some more testimony. We're going to look at a forensic toxologist and the friend's victim and ex-boyfriend as well. We'll see how far we get tomorrow. We should get through hopefully day 4 and day 5. Day 3 is just some more medical examiner information. It's some cross-examination, which we will probably skip through. as I think at this point we have a pretty good idea of the victim's health prior and leading up to her death. So as always, I super appreciate you guys hanging out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow at 1 p.m. EST. See you then.